I'd like to call to order the City of Littleton City Council virtual study session for Tuesday, July 14, 2020. It is 6:30. All council members are present. All right. So we have two items on our agenda tonight. Our first item will be ID number 20-170. It's the 2020 to 2021 council work plan update. And let's see, the purpose of this is going to be that council is going to receive an update on the changes to our plan for the 2020-2021 work plan. So I'll turn it over to City Manager.
All right, thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. We have a lot to cover. I think I just may want to start off by sharing that, the development of the work plan has been a multi-year process. I think each year we tend to make some improvements upon that, and I'm going to comment on that a little bit later. But in essence, this really is a plan that reflects the council's priorities and shows the council, as well as our citizens, the different milestones and tasks that we intend to kind of pursue as it relates to those priorities. And so the point of the discussion this evening is kind of check in with that, just to make sure that we are hitting the target for City Council. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam Fox, the Assistant City Manager, and she's going to start us off here on this work plan.
Thank you, Mark. So as the mayor said, we're going to give you an update tonight. Mark, myself, our Community Development Director, Jennifer Henninger, and our Public Works Director, Keith Reister, will be presenting. We are going to cover a little bit of background. We're going to touch on our strategic leadership framework and the volume of work staff is focusing on right now. We're going to go through the changes to the work plan, highlight a couple of items council would like to have specific conversations about, solid waste and short-term rentals, and then we'll touch on a parking lot. Just want to remind everyone, we're in a unique situation with COVID-19. It's absolutely impacted our capacity and ability to do some of these projects. Staff presented some initial impacts of this in April. This will serve as an update to that. We've also got the two items council added for discussion tonight, solid waste and short-term rentals, and we'll be using this as an opportunity to confirm priorities ahead of the budget. I want to talk about our history just a little bit here. 2017 was when we first started doing these work plans, and we called it a priorities work plan. 2018, we transitioned to the strategic imperatives language, and this is when we first saw the financial sustainability goal, as well as the Envision Littleton goal, which you may recall was vision to comp plan at that time. 2019 is when we became more formal with a one-year work plan and had our first public dashboard online where the community could track progress. 2020, we've come to a two-year work plan, and this is the cycle we'd like to continue. I'm going to let Mark touch base on a little bit about the leadership framework and cover our next couple of slides. Mark?
So council has seen this before. We have introduced this here probably about a year ago, and it does start with some work that we've been pursuing here first within the center, the vision, the values, the mission of this organization. And we'll touch on this here a little bit later, but this had been a central focus of the work plan for 2020, and it's gotten delayed here because of COVID-19 here, but it is going to be resurrected and we're going to be moving forward with that. But that is kind of the center of how we kind of look at the leadership of this organization and how we, in essence, move the wheel around on the edges. And so it obviously, in the very beginning at the top there, it starts with the city council and the community. So the council is elected, you've got a set of priorities and goals that you hope to accomplish. And then we typically move into the strategic planning process, usually in a retreat around the 1st of February. It has always been my hope that we refine the strategic planning process, perhaps in much more detail. In fact, I've had a conversation with at least one of you about how the work plan is eventually kind of measuring outcomes. How do we know we have success with some of our goals? We'll talk about that perhaps a little later in more detail if the council's interested. Once the council sets the goals and we have kind of a strategic plan, It then kind of rolls into the budget process. Priority-based budgeting obviously is the focus of this organization. So we're trying to measure certainly the outputs, the outcomes of priority-based budgeting and the services and programs. Eventually, when council approves a budget, that moves into the service plan and how we deliver that to our citizens. That translates, of course, then into the individual goals of each employee. And then the big goal towards the end here is the measurement of all this. And then obviously process improvement. So this is the continuous circle of this organization. This is something that I have hoped that we would implement over time. We are making progress in my view, but this is one of the core issues that I believe this organization needs to pursue in order for us to be successful and for our citizens to have confidence in this organization. Sam, the next one, please. So council's probably seen this as well. We had this in the retreat for the last couple of years. It's kind of the flight analogy. I think it makes a lot of sense. It kind of shows you the council responsibility. You're certainly at the highest level, the purpose, the vision. And as the plane kind of comes into the runway here, there's obviously the strategic goals, which is a little bit more definition. The priority action items, that's the, as we call the 30,000 foot level. And then over time, we start to hand this off to staff, the planning, the project delivery, the day-to-day work. And so I think this analogy, quite honestly, makes a lot of sense. I think we're trying to understand what is the real vision of the city council and your hopes, your goals, and then we eventually translate that into action. Sama, next. Okay, so obviously in the work plan, one of the challenges is trying to understand what are the goals, what is it that council hopes to accomplish, and then lay out some kind of a plan with very specific action steps that we hope to accomplish. And my responsibility, of course, is trying to figure out, well, what's the capacity of the organization? What is it that we can really do? And then we come back to the council, and there's many times options about how we approach all that, whether it's moving priorities around in time, perhaps in scope, or certainly we can bring in consultants at some level here to kind of help us move things forward. And so one of the things that we just always have to be kind of aware of is the regular work at the bottom, the day-to-day stuff that all of staff does, whether it's the police department, public works, planning. And then we have certainly the next level above that, which is kind of the special, the urgent workload, which seems this particular year is dominating everything we're doing. But then we certainly tonight, we're going to talk about now that we seem to have a little bit more confidence in where we're going with the COVID-19 issue. Where are we at with capacity? And do we have the opportunity to add things? And perhaps, I want to introduce this concept of the parking lot. Maybe there are some things that the council feels is a high priority, but we need to kind of discuss them at a later point. And quite honestly, we have an opportunity here with the council during the budget process in September to get a better understanding of where we're at, not only in 2020, but in 2021 and beyond. And I think that's when, in my view, the parking lot can be part of that conversation and trying to decide what is it that council hopes to accomplish. Okay, Sam.
Thank you. Council, do we have any questions before I jump into goal 1 here? Hearing none, we'll move right on into goal 1. So just a quick reminder, we have 4 objectives in goal 1: unified land use code, additional code enhancements, the Littleton engineering design standards, and economic development strategic planning. We are making good progress on goal 1. 6 months into a 2-year work plan during a global pandemic, we're 22% complete with our action steps for this goal. We have completed phase 1 of the ULUC. We've completed a number of code updates, including criminal code, downtown phase 1, fire ban, floodplains, lien process, and special events. We've completed the areas of economic significance analysis and phase 1 of the economic model. We have had some changes. International codes has been delayed. Staff is now recommending we adopt 2021 to be in line with other cities. Metro districts has been delayed, though it's in progress at this point in time, coming up on your calendar shortly. The economic strategic plan has also been delayed. Short-term rentals has been advanced, and we will talk about that next. For council conversation, district formation analysis has also been advanced at council's request, And then we've had a few things added. The downtown phase 2 updates, which KKC is working on, an election code update before our 2021 election, and implementation of ENCODE, a new software to host our municipal code. Council, do you have any questions on goal 1 before we move into short-term rentals? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer Henninger, who will talk about short-term rentals.
Sorry, I do.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Karina.
I don't think I know what the code update for the election code is, or the implementation of ENCODE.
Sure. So the election code update is something new we've recently added. This is really just some cleanup items before we get to the 2021 election. And Reed may be able to provide more detail. I'm happy to follow up at a later time as well if needed.
So is this something that like we have to do because, you know, as we get into 2021, it's just, you know, either not applicable or?
Okay. It's recommended to bring our code up to date.
Okay. And then ENCODE is what? And that was added for what purpose?
ENCODE is the new city code software that the ULUC will be utilizing. We'd like to transition all of our code so it's consistent.
Right. Okay, so it's more aligned to be able to utilize ULUC in the way that we're working through it now. Okay.
Correct.
If I may just jump in there a little bit, I think this is going to completely replace the current software, what is it called, Reed, the Sterling codifier system.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, that's been pretty clumsy for lots of reasons. And so ENCODE is just something that was much more efficient here with the ULUC. So we just pushed it into the entire city code.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. Jennifer, would you like to take over for short-term rentals?
Yes. Good evening, Council. This evening we have before you kind of our recommendation. We've heard from quite a few of you in regards to short-term rentals and what can we do kind of in the meantime as we address it fully in the ULUC. And so I just have a few slides to walk through kind of an approach that we would like to suggest and get council feedback on. Right now, what we're able to do is use our existing resources of police, code, and mediation for issues that we have arising with short-term rentals. What we're suggesting is really taking a phased approach. And phase 1 would be updating our licensing code. Right now, it's a little outdated, and we would be able to add some information that we don't currently have in regards to short-term rentals. And I'll cover a little bit more of that in the next slide. On phase 2, for phase 2, we would be addressing short-term rentals, STRs, and the land use section of our code. And I can tell you already that KKC does have some draft language surrounding STRs, where they might be appropriate, how we would handle them, how we would define them. None of that as it right now exists in the code. And then as part of our ULUC, as we've kind of recommended all along, is take the reconciliation of the new licensing that we would do over the next few months, as well as the new STR language, and then also take the citizens initiative, which was included as part of your packet, and reconcile all of those as part of the ULUC. And when we adopt the ULUC in 15 months, in October of 2021, all of that would come together. Sam, can I have the next slide? Thank you. So a little bit more details on phase 1, that we would have basically develop a City of Littleton Good Neighbor handout. We included in your packet ones that we have seen from Colorado Springs. There are other communities, especially up in the mountains, that also have these Good Neighbor handouts. So basically we would develop one that is specific to Littleton and handed out when people apply for business licenses for short-term rentals. And then we'd also establish an annual license policy for short-term rentals. This would be a new code section, and community development would work closely with Reed on creating this language. And here we would have to define short-term rental dwelling units, which we do not have a current definition of, then require the annual license to be renewed each calendar year, and also establish a fee. And those fees in community range anywhere from $200 to $2,000. So that is something that we would need council direction on in establishing fees. So that's kind of what we suggest for a phase one of what we could do over the next, I believe we had 3 to 6 months on there. Samara, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So what we are recommending and looking for council input on is truly a measured approach, a phased approach, if you will. And we really feel like this approach would fit the scale of the issue. If you remember in your packet, we included both a map and kind of a breakdown of where short-term rentals fit in the number of dwelling units that we have in the city. So right now we have 39 short-term rentals registered, which accounts for less than 0.5% of our structures within the city. So we do feel like this phased approach fits the scale of what we're talking about. And what we're talking about in phase one as well would not have any budget implications. And a big reason for that, again, is we have KKC already on board. They have started to develop some short-term rental language that you'll see as we move into the neighborhood section, and we as staff can start to utilize that if we feel like we need to adopt something sooner than the ULUC. And also during this time, it would allow the city to figure out what the long-range budget implications are. There'll be kind of one-time cost if we go through a consultant and utilize a consultant to set up a program to help a little bit more in depth on the short-term rental code and codification of that. And we have talked to 2 different consultants that specialize in short-term rentals, and the ranges of fees that you have in there are based on our conversations with those consultants. And then you also have the annual fees. There would be some revenues that could possibly be realized. Right now, sales tax wise, and Tiffany, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, it looks to be about $11,000 annually that we're getting from short-term rentals through sales tax. And if we do decide to initiate a fee, there would be additional revenues there. So that is what we are suggesting. Would love to get feedback on that. Do we have any questions? Do we want to take questions now or get through the rest of the council work plan, Sama?
I would say we would pause on this issue and maybe back up a slide, and let's let council kind of give us some feedback and see if this is going to be deep enough here specifically for phase one, and see if this makes sense.
I have a question to start with. So the 11,000 is what we're currently receiving or projecting?
Tiffany, do you want to jump in? I believe that is what we estimate we are currently receiving.
Okay. And then
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say that would be reflective of the 2019 calendar year.
Okay, good. And then a question for Reed. I'm not sure what the time frame with Candid Keys to get all this implemented, or to us so that we can get it implemented regarding short-term rentals. But as far as short-term rentals go today, with what we have available, and you had talked about doing a phased-in approach, but right now we can shut down problem properties or nuisance properties today. Is that correct, Reed?
We can, using what our existing tools are right now. So by shutting down nuisance properties, generally we're going from a code enforcement perspective or a police enforcement perspective. And that relates to noise, trash, any number of building violations, exterior of the property violations. That's how we would handle it right now. Obviously, for some of the, I would say, more common law type definition of nuisance properties, that's where Ryan from our mediation team has been getting involved, trying to track down the actual property owners and either brokering some sort of deal or at least putting them on notice that we are aware of what's going on at their property, and the city will take further steps to combat that in the future. I know the city manager and I have actually talked about another level of enforcement, which would come by way of the city manager reaching out to that property owner and letting them know that we may attempt to impose costs for the response time that we've had to have to those various properties, which are quote unquote those nuisance properties. So we do have some items available at our disposal, Mayor.
Great. And council, I can't see who has questions, so you just bark it out.
Let me jump in there if you wouldn't mind, Jerry. You know, Sam, you said 39, excuse me, Jennifer, you said 39 units. Is that right? Currently licensed?
We have 39 currently registered.
Right. And I think at last year at this time or a little earlier, we had recognized close to 100. And so what's our plan to, maybe Reed, you have already answered it, but you know, what's our plan to do with those other 60 or so units that aren't licensed?
You know, and I think Tiffany can also jump in with this one. I believe when the city has become aware of a business that's operating within the city, our sales tax division will actually send them a letter letting them know that they're required to get a license. I would imagine, Councilmember Driscoll, is we would be much more proactive in terms of this phased approach. So if we had more robust licensing requirements, and some of those initial things are trying to figure out local contacts, requiring a property owner who wants to avail themselves of short-term rentals, they better have someone available 24 hours a day that we know that we can contact, that our police department can contact. So almost as if a property manager, if they're not actually living within the home at that time. So those types of things we would add in.
So one other item that I do need to clarify, Pat, is that when we had that number of the 100, that was actually within the Littleton postal address. Much fewer of them were in Littleton City proper.
Jerry, I have a question for staff. Are you talking about phasing this in with the code updates? So what we're doing for phase 1 is just for downtown?
No, it would apply to the whole city.
Okay. Kind of seeing this for the first time, I know we've talked about a phased-in approach. I'm reacting to it on the fly without having a chance to think about it much. But I don't know how other council members feel, but I know there is a capacity issue, but it seems like it's a very long time to get to where we need to go. And if it's not a problem, it's not a problem. When it is a problem, it's huge. And we hear about it. So this seems to me to not have very much teeth very quickly. That's my impression. I don't know what other council members think.
Mayor, could I make a suggestion for Sama to unshare her screen so that you have the ability to see all of council? Yes.
Sure. Either that or council could use the raise the hand function.
Yes.
Any other questions, council?
And one other clarification. I think the slide shows that the first phase would be 3 to 4 months. In some of my conversations with Reed, I think there's steps that we could take that would be far shorter than that. But so I think just keep in mind the first phase is probably less than 4 months.
I mean, I would really advocate for that. And again, I can't remember the details, but it seems to me getting licensing when these people are already licensed and now it's renewed doesn't seem to be kind of much different than what we've been doing all the way along. And I truly believe in the integrity of our neighborhoods, that we shouldn't have STRs that have people with bad behavior. I think it speaks to the integrity of our neighborhood. And that's my opinion. I think we should have something that has more teeth quicker. I think 18 months is a long time to wait.
We'll go to Scott and then Karina.
Yeah, it'd be very helpful to me to have a better sense from staff of where they believe the complexities around this issue really lie. It seems to me like you inventory, you license, you regulate, you enforce. I mean, that's a dance that the city has been through innumerable times, not to mention that our neighbors and countless communities around the nation have already invented this wheel. I don't understand why it ought to take so long unless it is just a straight ahead capacity issue. Until I understand from staff's perspective what that complexity is all about, it's very difficult for me to assess whether this phased approach and this kind of a timeline is our best way to go about this problem. So, and in the meantime, I agree with Pam that, you know, this tends to be an outsized problem for the people who are experiencing it. We've received just agonized emails from neighbors of some of the bad apple short-term rentals in the community, and you know, that also it burdens the really good short-term rental owners, right? Who get a bad reputation and an enforcement eye cast upon them, and so on. Not to mention that it colors the elections, right? People vote on this issue, and it just seems like the community needs to fix it, move on to bigger issues. So, Scott, you're living up to your hurry up and get it done way. Councilmember Elrod, then Milliman.
Thank you, Jerry. You know, I actually think that's exactly what we're seeing here, Scott. I think you said it well. There's, you know, the various phases of inventorying, licensing, regulating. I'm missing one of them, but this phase one, in essence, is doing those first two. It's ensuring that, you know, we've got the right license in place. And as part of that effort, I would expect that we would find a way to ensure we, you know, go beyond the 39 and we reach the potentially 80, 90, whatever might be out there. And I think there's really great ways that that can be done. How do we incentivize voluntary licensing as opposed to us going out trying to find them? How do we encourage them to, you know, come to us and become licensed, and why there's an advantage of it? While I, you know, to your point, Scott, we can provide them with some tools that Jennifer has just shared with us that helps them to be successful, so that, you know, all short-term rentals, you know, so that they don't have the bad reputation from just the one. So I do think this initial step of licensing is where we should always start first. And I think we're getting there to where we are going to be challenged, and why staff and KKC, you know, have talked about this is this is a discussion at the neighborhood level. What may be right in one neighborhood may not be right in another neighborhood, and for us to try to define this across the board may not be right. And we won't know that until we get to that neighborhood, and then we're maybe redoing it. And I think that's inefficient, and I do feel that we're taking the right initial step. I also just want to reaffirm what I heard from Reed and Mark. I think you've given us some indication of this in the email, is we are maybe formalizing more so and being more proactive and reacting to these complaints, so that we can, what's the word I'm looking for? We can leverage what's already in our power and just do it better and quicker. Maybe we've not paid attention to code enforcement as much as we should. So I think this is a great first step.
Great. Councilmember Milliman.
I would agree with Karina. I think this measured approach sounds like a really good idea, and it does sound like that there's been more of an effort to deal with some of these, a small number of problem properties, if you will. to me, it seems like a majority of the STRs in the city are operating without people even knowing that they're STRs. But I would agree with you. I like this measured approach. And quite honestly, with COVID right now and what our future could be in the next couple of 4 to 6 to 12 months, I don't think many people are going to be renting STRs in Littleton. So I think we have that period of time to get this process in place and work with the STRs. I did have a question about accessory dwelling units. Does that fall under STRs at all? And if so,
accessory dwelling units are a separately defined issue from short-term rentals. A lot of times in communities, you will see ADUs, accessory dwelling units, used as a short-term rental, but they are two separate things. And both will be addressed in the ULUC.
All right, we'll go Councilmember Driscoll, then Fay.
Yeah, Jennifer, did you take into consideration the work that the two groups did, the people for short-term rentals? And I see Reed shaking his head, yes. It seemed to me that was a pretty good compromise, and they put some good effort into that. I just want to make sure that's acknowledged, and why, back to what Pam said, why we have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, we're not the first community to have to deal with short-term rentals. There's a lot of information out there right now already that we can use. So just.
Yes, no, we definitely have it. We have actually passed that information along to KKC as well. So they're implementing it. The big thing with the citizen initiative that was put together is the enforcement aspect of it and kind of outlining what that would look like. They have great ideas, but the enforcement of that is where we as staff need to figure out how we codify the enforcement of that, as well as have the people and the staff in order to do the enforcement of that.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Fay.
In Kathleen's slides, there was the number for annual, it looked like annual maintenance by a consultant. What does that buy us?
So we have a breakdown of that, and that can get you anywhere from setting up the one-time fee. I had this up, but I had to reboot my computer. Mike, do you have that in front of you right now? It gets us a variety of services, basically, to kind of set up a one-time fee for it, as well as doing a housing analysis or an economic impact analysis. It also can go into some enforcement aspects of it. It can get into the collecting of the revenues aspects of it. So again, this is all things that we need to look into as a staff and city and our citizens to figure out what approach we want to have.
It seems like a lot of money to spend every year for a limited amount of income. How do we justify that?
And that's part of this phased approach, is really figuring out how much do we want to spend for what we could get out of it.
I think depending upon the regulations that are put in place, we estimated that it may take between a half-time full-time employee or a full-time employee, and that's where you get some of the annual costs in order to enforce the provisions. That we may need extra support.
And what would those provisions that are being enforced? Now we're talking about how many properties?
So right now we have 39, but there, as you noted, there possibly could be more. And
30 properties and half a full-time person, half an FTE. What are they doing with those properties?
And that would probably depend upon the regulations that we want to put in place For example, if we're doing inspections annually, which is a possibility, that certainly could account for a half of a full-time employee to do annual inspections and follow up on violations that might be occurring.
Right now we have Brian helping us with that.
Correct.
Well, let me just say that my feedback on that section is, seems like a lot of money to do what I see on the slide, but I would need more details about what those things entail.
And we do too, hence the phased approach.
You don't know either. Okay.
Okay, great.
And if I may, sorry, Mayor, if I could just chime in.
Sure.
Some of the proposals by the citizens that they had brought in and presented back in April of, I want to say 2019, a lot of it had to do with kind of two different types of licenses, those that were owner occupied, those in which an individual may just be renting out their house for the week and, going up to the mountains or another property that they may own. Within there, depending on how we layer this on in this phased approach, there are limitations in terms of how often you could have your place rented out. There are limitations proposed in regard to maximum occupancy per resident. So those types of things, depending on how complicated you get and how deep you get into it, is probably affects kind of the level of enforcement that you need in order to monitor all that.
Great. All right. Thank you. I just want to say, I realize it's going to take a while yet to get there with a final product, but I think the phased in approach, Reed, is the way to go right now. Code enforcement, though, or enforcement of the nuisance properties is what I would like to see us somehow be ready to deal with that. Because I know that we have the one or two right now that can be an issue more frequently than we would like. And I think, Kelly, you had mentioned the auxiliary units. And that's a whole nother critter almost. It's like building another little tiny house on the property. So it involves a lot more, whether or not it's a permanent renter or not a permanent renter, but somebody who actually rents or a short-term rental. So that's another whole bailiwick that we'd have to deal with. Council, any more questions on this issue? Great. Oh, Karina.
Jerry, I would just like to, again, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but advocate that we could increase the timeline and use some boilerplate from KC or another city or whatever, and not make it complicated, and just use what we have and move at a faster pace. So that's what I would advocate.
All right, great. Karina.
Just a question on process, Mark. So what happens next?
Well, let's see. Let me add a couple of thoughts here. And, the council members who've been here 2 years ago when we wrestled with this, I'm going to respond to the complexity issue here. It is, on the surface, it may sound simple, but I think the experience from 2 years ago should prove to us that it is far from that. In fact, I think the questions from Councilmember Fay, I think, are really on target and give you a pretty good indication that there's a lot of questions for which the council has to answer, and it can influence different parts of the city. And I think that's the complexity, is trying to decide what it is, how far do you want to take it? And not only just in cost, but in enforcement. And there are all sorts of tools that we can use where it doesn't have to be city staff. And I can never remember the name of that firm that we looked at.
Post-compliance.
Post-compliance, thank you, wow. There's a firm that you can hire that actually does a lot of the monitoring for us, and quite honestly, for a moderate price. They are a typical agency group, private sector group that is used throughout the country. So it is complex. I acknowledge that many of council would like to deal with this quickly, and we tried that 2 years ago, and it just didn't work. And so I think that's why the staff highly recommends we take this phased approach, and it also fits in with the budget conversation we'll have in September. so that the council understands where are we at financially for 2021 and beyond. And I think that will influence your decision about how far you want to take enforcement and how aggressive you want to be about it. Yes, there are all sorts of examples throughout this state alone on how to manage short-term rentals. I've seen many of them. I've talked to many of my peers about it. And one thing I can assure all of council is whatever we do, whether it's in 3 to 4 months or 18 months, we will be back in just over a year or two, modifying it again. That is the cycle of short-term rentals. There is no easy answer. And so I deeply respect where council comes from, but I really do request that we take the phased approach, and staff will do everything in our power to take as big a bite as we can within the first 3 months here, as deep as we can, without getting too controversial about it, and respect the work that the citizens did here 2 years ago with that group. That is my recommendation.
All right, thank you, Mark. All right, let's continue with the presentation, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me just share my screen again. Okay, can you all see the presentation again?
Yes.
Perfect. So we are just going to move right on into goal 2. The highlight of the objectives here for, again, essentially priority-based budgeting, evaluating fee structures, long-term capital needs, and then long-term funding needs. We are 17% complete on this, 53% in progress. Some of the items we've completed are alignment with Envision Littleton and our priority-based budgeting system. We received guidance from council on priority-based budgeting. We've got our cost of services study complete, our fiber optic master plan, and our grant policy updated. We do see a slightly larger percentage here of items in progress. And this is really because a lot of the items specifically under that assessing capital needs are longer projects. They take more time, and we're going to see a higher amount of those in progress at one time. We've had quite a few changes here with COVID. Specifically, ADA transition plans have been delayed. The impact fee model has also been delayed, though that is in progress now. We have the sustainability plan that's been advanced for council conversation tonight. We'll talk about that next, specifically regarding solid waste. We have a number of items that have been added or re-added. So the bridge master plan was re-added. You may remember this from 2019. CARES Act funding was added to identify and track how much work staff is really putting into this, because it is quite a bit of work to manage that funding. Traffic master plan has been added, which is a key implementation of the transportation master plan. The undergrounding plan has been re-added, and the water resources management plan has been added. Council, do you have any questions on goal 2 before we move into the solid waste conversation?
I have a question, Sam.
Scott?
So, I feel, and I think that a number of council members share this feeling that the number one project with regard to the city's future financial sustainability is being successful with a sales tax ask to our citizens. And we're certainly going to need a whole bunch of lead time to make sure that we give that effort every chance of succeeding. I wonder if there should be some kind of standing committee that's talking about this on an ongoing basis, some kind of standing effort to make sure that we're working in that direction.
We have, is there a response for?
Mark, did you want to respond to that one?
Sure. I think if the question is, I've seen in many other cities, there's perhaps 2 approaches that I've seen. One is a council subcommittee that tends to work with staff to kind of look at the kind of financial struggles and see how we kind of prep that material over time for the balance of council. That's one way. The other is cities have looked at an citizen advisory committee that's kind of standing. Perhaps it's a task force. The difference is the task force is a very specific point in time for a set duration. So if your question is whether or not we need to consider those kinds of things, I think that's certainly up to council to kind of talk about here, whether it's tonight or certainly at some point in the near future, perhaps even around the budget discussion here in September.
Yeah, something along those lines is the question that I have. I really just think it's so critical that we be keeping a close eye on that we give ourselves enough time to prepare, and that we're making it an ongoing priority. So.
Is that it, Scott?
Yep.
Thank you. We have Councilmember Fay, then Elrod.
I don't appreciate Councilmember Malin speaking for all of us, that most of us.
Carol, I didn't speak for all of us. I said a number of the council members, I believe, share my feeling. You're free right now to refute that. Go ahead.
I am speaking. It is my turn.
Go ahead.
Is it my turn or is it Scott's turn?
If you will, please, Councilmember Fay.
Let me phrase that differently. What Councilmember Malin said, that he believes that most of council is in favor of a tax increase, does not cover me. I don't remember there being any activity in council where that information was actually gathered. Perhaps it was done behind the scenes. I am not for a sales tax increase. I want the city to use the money we have wisely so that we aren't overspending.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Councilmember Elrod.
So kind of in that discussion, I go back to the objectives. So one of our objectives is to identify and assess opportunities for funding. So this is the long-term funding needs. And I think there's many ways to achieve that, from cost saving, from reprioritization of investment, and from incremental revenue, and right? And when I look at our goals, the only one that I see that ties to that particular objective about identifying, assessing, is the CARES Act funding, I think, maybe the impact fees. So I think we have to have, this is such an important, financial sustainability is such an important goal and program for us. And my initial reaction was, why does the Bridge Master Plan fall under financial sustainability? So I think we have to have a greater link between the objectives and the actions that we're taking to really determine, are we getting to the outcome that we desire? This is one that I spent some time talking to Mark about, of saying, how do we know we're achieving financial sustainability? What is our measure? Are we showing that based on our actions, we're reducing costs, or we're reallocating funding to what is a priority, or that we're bringing in new revenue, whether through short-term rentals, through impact fees, or another form of a tax, whatever that may be. So I feel there is a little bit of a gap and more work that needs to be done for this very important goal to us. I'm a little concerned that there is so much in progress. I understand Pamela's point, these are big things. This is critical. This impacts everything else we do at the city.
Thank you, Councilmember El. And Councilmember Elrod, your audio is coming through pretty good, but your video keeps locking up a little bit. Just give you a heads up there. I don't know why.
Yeah, I hope I'm smiling and not like,
Okay. Anybody else, Council? Okay. But regarding the sales tax issue, I want to see more of a budget. I know we're going through a budget-based process, and I want to see more in the budget to see really where are we, especially after this COVID-19 stuff, or where are we, and how necessary will a tax increase be, at least for this coming year? Or I think we're missing the boat for this coming year already, because the window's pretty closing on us. So it might be for discussion for next year. But I think it's a good one after the budget process and we go through that. Then we have Councilmember Milliman.
I'll just put my 2 cents in. Again, I want everybody to remember with the census numbers coming out next year, we're going to be a bigger city. That means more people in our city. That means more pressure on our city services. And I know that we can tighten the belt and be more efficient in what we're doing. And I feel like we are. But always just remember that in the back of your head. I think we're going to be over 50,000 people, probably well over by next year. And that will impact our budget going forward. And I have a question. When was the last time the city of Littleton had a sales tax increase? Does anybody know? Tiffany, Mark, Reed?
Tiffany would know that.
If I remember correctly, it's been at least 20, 30, maybe even 40 years.
That's a long time. And we've grown in the city quite, we've grown since then, and we're going to keep growing. And we really need to think about that going forward.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Grove.
We've alluded to this, but I don't know what the definitive answer is. Is it too late to put a sales tax increase on the ballot for November? Have we missed that, or is that still up for discussion?
Go ahead, City Manager.
Technically, it's not too late, but I think practically it's far too late. I think the work that's necessary in order for us to basically put a story together and share with our residents is just too time consuming and certainly far too less of time. So I think the real practical answer is the first real opportunity is going to be a year from this November.
Great, thank you. And that's why I'm thinking that if we get through this coming budget, we look at it, and then if there's a story, as the city manager just mentioned, that's where the budget will tell that story for us. We'll go from there. We have Council Member Pro Tem Milliman, and then Council Member Elrod.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. I'm not advocating for putting this on the November ballot. And I forgive me, but I think we've been. I think the writing's on the wall here. I think we're pretty well aware of the crises in particular our capital fund. And I don't mean to put Tiffany on the spot, but and Mark, I'll put you on the spot. I think I've asked this question bluntly, and I've got blunt answers back. Right? We don't see reducing our expenditures and any kind of modest fee increases as solving what we see as, again, these kind of financial crises, right? I think, staff's been pretty clear that our only exit is if we are successful with the sales tax increase. Am I wrong about that? I don't know.
Well, I'll share my opinion here, but, I think there's several things in play that position us for whatever we believe may be necessary. And I'm speaking specifically about the capital fund. So I think what really influences us now as compared to, say 6 months ago is COVID-19. So now we have not a pretty significant challenge in the general fund just because of the loss of revenue. And so we're going to have to wrestle with that and reconcile that. And I think many of you council members have commented the priority-based budgeting system is the tool that we're recommending so that we do reprioritize. You do put the resources where you believe, you as council believe is the priority. And then that's how we kind of manage the general fund. It's a lot more difficult than I just said, but that's definitely the approach. Part of the budget process that we are setting up, and this is in part in request of council, is that we are going to talk about and show you options for revenue beyond just sales tax. And this was actually part of your retreat material here back in February, and we're going to bring that forward here. I don't know the exact date. I think we're looking at some time before September where we'll do a little bit of pre-work with council and talk about some of this. So revenue options on just a much larger scale will be discussed here prior to the real budget. Now, in the end, my opinion is that will get us only so far. And I'm confident that at some point, the council is going to have to wrestle with some level of a sales tax increase for capital if you are convinced that you need to take on capital improvements as a result of the growth that's happened in the last 20 years. It's all a matter of scale and priority. So I think we'll probably leave it at that, but at some point in time, I'm convinced you will have to wrestle with that question.
Council Member Elrod?
Actually, Mark just answered my question. I was looking for having that revenue discussion before or during the budget process because it is a contributing factor to our decisions in our budget, both short-term and long-term. So thank you, Mark. I think that's a great approach.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. If there's no other questions, let's move on.
Thank you, Council. Great comments, great questions. Okay, I'm going to hand this over to Keith, who is going to move into our sustainability conversation.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to make sure you can hear me. I know you can't see me.
I hear you.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. So two of the things that came out of the council work session were related to sustainability and solid waste. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those two situations and what the current status is and where it might go. So as of now, we do not have a sustainability or a solid waste plan. Related to sustainability, if I went and interviewed the 7 of you and asked you for a definition of sustainability, I'd get probably 7 different answers, which is part of the complication of doing a sustainability plan for any community, having done a few of these in my career across the country. So what we've started with is I've tasked a staff member in my group to just work with all the departments to do an inventory of what we currently do. Not going out and plan what we might do or any of those things, just inventory what we do. More than likely, we'll have that completed by September, just due to all the other things that we have to do. And my discussions with the city manager are that as part of the budget process, we can come and share with you that information and also ask you if you want to go forward with that in 2021. I'm going to be very honest about a couple of things. You can see in the upper right-hand box, those are all the challenges that exist to moving forward with sustainability. There are no staff resources. There's no available budget. We have pretty much no time availability. We have pretty much nobody with expertise in the organization beyond a couple of people. And sustainability is an item that by default brings in a high level of community engagement because people can be very passionate about this issue, from I want to save the world to a sustainability plan is a secret plot to have the UN take over the United States. And you might laugh at that, but I have sat in meetings and had that told to me before by well-meaning citizens. And I'm not discounting their opinion. I'm just saying that you have the broadest spectrum available of opinion here. Currently, there are no time or resources allocated to this. And to move forward, even with staff time, you're going to need that level of, you're going to need consultants on board to help with the public engagement. So you're looking, so that the plan that is potentially there is, the first thing we might take on is vision and goals work with you and staff to decide what is sustainability just generally in this community, and then move forward if you want to go from there into the community engagement. I'm going to be also direct that adding a citizen task force would be challenging because we do not have the staff time to support that. I can speak to that pretty directly, having added a new board and commission in 2020 or 2019 and 2020 for transportation and what that challenge is time-wise. So I can say to you that by the end of the summer, we'll have an inventory of what we currently do, and then that'll be a discussion point as we head into the 2021 budget discussion with you about what you would like to pursue into 2021 on this particular topic. So if you want, I can shoot to the next slide and talk a little bit about solid waste because they're a little bit tied together. And then we can kind of loop back to both of them. Solid waste came up, and there's only one slide here, which I put up, which says integrated. What is integrated solid waste management? It's a pretty encompassing term. And I also attached in your packet a pretty significant spreadsheet, which we put together to show you the range of doing nothing to becoming a full service hauler on your own, the complexity and challenges with those, and what the potential dollars are to get going in those areas, not necessarily sustain those efforts. And I have that. I can pop that up onto the screen to discuss that with you if you'd want. But I wanted to do that to give you a sense of what it takes to do some of those things, and that's not none of those things in solid waste. You can flip a switch, and we're going to say we're going to be there tomorrow. And part of that complication is we're telling in a number of those models, we're telling private sector companies how to do their business. And that, in Colorado, that doesn't go over very well sometimes, even when you're just doing regulatory work. So it's going to be a challenging process no matter what route is chosen if you decide to do something in that market area. So with that, and like the other one, we do not have time or resources budgeted for that work at this time. And we really don't have depth of staff in terms of experience to tackle those. So with that, that's kind of where we are. That's kind of what's potentially in front of you. And I'm open to any questions or discussion that you might have about that. Or if you want me to discuss the worksheet, I can pop that up on the screen as well.
Good. I do have a quick question for City Manager or Keith. So as we're moving forward with sustainability, it can also be our vehicles. Are we looking at vehicles that are electrical types? And also to add to that, with our remodeling that we're likely to do here soon, does it include solar panels, and charging stations?
So I'll be happy to jump in on that discussion. Certainly we've moved towards energy efficiency in all of our platforms as much as possible when we have the opportunity to do. We do not have an electric vehicle infrastructure yet, and we have a relatively small percentage of our fleet which we can move over to electric vehicles now. They're pretty much limited to light duty car vehicles. Certainly we're not going to go there with police or large public works trucks because the infrastructure is just not there for that in terms of the vehicles. We have had discussions with Excel about working with their organization to map out locations throughout the city that we could partner with private or other entities to have charging stations added to their infrastructure, but there's certainly a cost on our part to that. On the building side, as you know, we've talked quite a bit about not having a facilities master plan. And when we get down later to the discussion about the CARES Act money in the council chamber, you'll see the implications of moving to a better energy efficiency platform. And we have some significant capital challenges to doing that, but we're certainly any project we take on, we're trying to do that. And we've done that, for example, with our traffic signals, moved most of them over to LEDs. And that cuts your costs about 90% on your electric bill. So we integrate that into projects. It's one of the legs of the stool we look at. We're just kind of hamstrung by what we've inherited a little bit at times.
Gotcha. Thank you. City Manager.
If I may just add on to Keith's comments here, and basically your questions, Mayor, I think are two good examples of what sustainability could be. And, I think I'm just going to make a quick comment about the word sustainability. I think it means many things, as Keith said, to a lot of people, and is a very difficult term to somehow communicate to citizens in a very concise way. In fact, the last city I was in the Pacific Northwest struggled with the exact same word. So I don't know if it's community resiliency or what it is, but I think the intent is, per the suggestion of staff, is to take time to inventory a lot of what we already do. And if, for example, there's things in stormwater or even in recycling paper, there's lots of things that we do. If we can pull this together and look at it and get some sense of where we're at, then I think after the budget process and line that up, I think that is an opportunity for council to say, well, is this a value to us? Is this something that we need to step into and actually pursue? Solid waste or some other level of this resiliency issue, I think that to me is the conversation we could have here this fall.
Great. Council, we'll start with Mayor Pro Tem, then we'll go to Elrod, then Fay.
Yeah, I'm not. Everyone knows how much this means to me. I'm not going to belabor that. Keith, I just want to ask you a quick question. I know that you've been involved with community resiliency plans or sustainability plans in Colorado communities with politics that I think are somewhat comparable to Littleton, for example, Loveland. And what have those communities gained by confronting all of the challenges that you mentioned? They saw these plans through. They must have seen the value in it. They must have felt like it was worthwhile. Why did they choose to confront those challenges? Why should Littleton? Maybe we can extrapolate from Loveland and other communities' experiences. What potentially does Littleton stand to gain or lose by doing this and not doing this?
Well, I think, it's in my experience over the years, typically it's a combination of a nexus of two things. Staff is moving in that direction. They've got the foundational work in as an organization and a community about what's important to them, a strong comprehensive plan and master plans. And then at the same time, you have a nexus with what the community is asking for. And one of the challenges, as I think Mark touched on, is that it's different in every community. It's different in Boulder versus Fort Collins versus Colorado Springs. And that's a reflection of the community values. So the upside sometimes is short term, which is identifying that we're going to focus on, say, I'll use examples, water quality and infrastructure resiliency to natural events. And then we're going to network with other partners. For example, you and I have talked about local food production. That's not something that we necessarily have expertise in, but there's other agencies out there that do. So we would be a partner in supporting their direction, but not necessarily be the leader. And sometimes it's that networking with your community. One of the struggles I think some communities have is it's hard to see short-term financial gains for your investment in a lot of cases. Even if, for example, Jerry brought up the question about solar panels. The ROI on those, if we put those on Littleton centers, a decade plus, and some folks struggle with that. That's part of the community discussion. So, if it's part of the community vision and it's part of the comprehensive plan where the citizens and the leadership wants to go, then there's an upside value to that. And preservation of the community is important.
Just a quick follow-up, if I could, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I obviously, I think, fall closer to the save the world end of the sustainability conversation, but I also understand that I, as an at-large council member, represent a constituency who may have a different take on this. I think that there is some version of a community resiliency conversation or a sustainability conversation, whatever you want to talk about it, that would be a tremendous enhancement to the quality of life in Littleton. We have such a historically sort of visionary approach to our environment. With South Platte Park as a shining example of that. I think that those values are pretty deeply seated in Littleton. I see so many people who just tremendously value things like their gardens, for example. And I just hope that council and staff are up for having at least some version of the conversation. I think the community at the end of that project would be enhanced potentially in very important ways.
Thank you. Council Member Elrod, and then Faye.
So this is something that has come up during the comprehensive plan, and Keith touched on this. This works when you have a strong vision, you have a strong comprehensive plan, and what the values of the community are. And this is interesting because we asked over and over again. When Kathleen was bringing us the comprehensive plan, we said, how come there's not sustainability in here? Can you try again? Can you ask it a different way? And it's not to say that there weren't comments around it, but it just didn't rise to the top, at least not now for the city and for our community. And I think that that is not at all saying it's not important. And I do think that once we get an inventory, I think we'll be very pleasantly surprised at how much we probably are already doing. And I do think the value of that inventory is to begin to kind of celebrate that it's just an intrinsic part of who we are as a community, valuing our natural resources. At the end of the day, regardless of the many ways that one can define sustainability, it's about the preservation of our natural resources, right? And responsible use of our natural resources so that we can continue to have them in the future. So for me, I think an inventory is just a good thing to do. What I've seen happen in the corporate sector, in the private sector, is that by doing something like that, it actually becomes something that internally within an organization, you're going to find a couple of people that are really passionate about it and become champions of it. And it becomes a grassroots effort internally from the organization. And I think we can find the same thing as grassroots efforts externally of city government. So I say, we've got a lot to do. And we have a lot of plans that we've completed and have to execute on it. And we still have plans that we haven't completed. We're not in a position right now to put in another request for a plan. And again, this is a good thing and it's a great idea. I just don't think it's where we have the capacity to support at this time.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else? All right.
I'll just second what Karina said there. I do think it's hugely important, and I appreciate Scott's passion for it. But with everything else we have on our plate, and as Keith laid out, not a lot of resources to dedicate to this this cause, this movement, I should say. I think we once again have to prioritize.
Great. All right. Anyone else? Council? Council Member Milliman.
Jerry, I have been waiting. I was supposed to be after Karina.
The floor is yours. The floor is yours, Councilmember Fay. And then Councilmember Milliman.
It seems this happens fairly often, Jerry. I would like for it to stop as a practice. I would like to have a definition. This comes after the comment from the beginning of this conversation that we possibly have as many different definitions of transparency and resiliency as we do council members. And we may have as many different definitions as we do citizens. I know that those are hot button words that for perhaps half of our citizens, they are valued and wonderful. And for perhaps half of our citizens, they are absolutely repellent. I'm not saying where I fall in on that. In fact, I don't fall in either ends of that. But so that we can have meaningful conversations, it would be so useful to have definitions of what those words mean, rather than keeping secret what those things mean. So for example, sustainability could mean using energy as frugally as possible. It could mean all kinds of different things, but in concrete, measurable. I think I'm going to stop on the word measurable. Could you measure this? Can you measure sustainability? No, you can't. But you can measure, did you reduce the energy bill or not? And so we will get a whole lot further on sustainability if we talk about it in terms of measurable. Thank you.
Great. Council Member Milliman.
Can you hear me?
Barely.
Okay, move up a little bit. I agree with Scott. I'm pretty passionate, green, enviro. and I understand the limitations right now given COVID and the kind of the curveball that's been thrown to us this year. If we can't have a sustainability committee or group going forward, I would just ask staff though, like you suggested, Jerry, with the upgrade of the city center, putting solar panels on, or if you're upgrading fleet and it can be an electric vehicle, to do that, taking those small steps going forward. It's an investment upfront now, but as Keith said, 10 years down the line, maybe you see the return on that investment, not only monetarily, but also with environmentally. And we are in climate change right now, and it's going to get tougher. And I think just going forward, if we pay attention as we're upgrading and taking inventory and all of that, and two, share that with the public, be a leader to the public, show that it's great to put up solar panels on your buildings or whatever it is that you're doing, just to be a leader in the community as well. That's it.
Great, thank you. Any other council members? All right, in regards to, Keith, you had mentioned starting up a new board. We actually started up 2 boards last year, and both of them have been, when we started them, when we created them, staff didn't think it was going to take too much of their time. However, I think we've learned on both of the new boards, it takes quite a bit of our time, staff time. And sometimes we have more staff at the meetings than we do board members. So I do appreciate your pointing out that everything's going to take a lot of staff time. In regards to the solar panels and electric cars or whatever, I do appreciate the city manager and Keith for you guys taking a look at it to see where practical, where we can put that in place. I too am passionate about that kind of stuff. So, Councilmember Fay.
A fun fact is that the originally built city center was completely heated with solar panels. And there wasn't another heating system. It turned out to be susceptible to things that come from the air and break it, hail. So hail broke all the panels, and then the system had to be replaced by a system that was what we have now. The way we got our system that we have right now is it was retrofitted into the building, which is primarily concrete structure called brutalism, same as ACC. And so this heating system we have right now is kind of cobbled together because it was the best that they could have been to replace the solar panels that all got broken by the hail. That's it.
Great, thank you. All right, let's move on. We got a few more slides to go.
We do. Can you all see my screen now?
No, yes, now we see it.
Great. Okay, I know we're a little bit behind, so let me try to move quickly through here. We have goal 3 next, good governance. Objectives include high-performing organization, strategic communications, strategic partnerships, and technology strategic planning. We are 16% complete here, 67% in progress. We've completed items related to 2020 resident business survey, as well as track at 9 implementation of phase 1. So much to some of the council members' points here. If I could point to our giant Gantt chart, I would show you that a lot of these lines cross the full 2 years, because collaborative relationships and strategic partnerships are something we have to build over time with milestones throughout the process. As we progress and evolve in our strategic leadership framework, we will build more outcomes into that so you can see more than just progress. We're still working through that.
Just as a side note, Mark, I appreciate the Gantt charts far more than the pie charts.
I can share with you the Gantt chart if you'd like, Jerry, but it's very small
okay.
on the
That's
screen.
okay. That's okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that.
We have had a number of changes here. This goal in particular has been impacted by COVID. The cybersecurity and risk management funding was reduced as some of our immediate reactions to COVID, or initial reactions rather. The Littleton 101 Citizens Academy has been delayed due to COVID. We will try for this again in 2021. The organizational development process has been delayed, and the update to the strategic communications plan has been eliminated at this point in time. We have split track at 9 into 2 phases. So we went ahead and adopted phase 1 and implemented track at 9. There's more work being done there to finish that out. And that is because of COVID delays and some staffing changes. We've added redistricting, formerly not on this plan. Redistricting is a process we'll need to go through after the 2020 census. And then we've also added Visit Littleton phase 2. You have the phase 1 coming up to council pretty shortly here, which is research. Phase 2 is building that brand. Any questions on goal 3? Just flipping through real quick. I see a question from Kelly.
I have a question. Why was funding reduced for cybersecurity and risk management?
Well, let's see. I'd be happy to answer that, Kelly. I think it was in the initial months, well, I guess probably the first couple of months, when the COVID-19 was pretty obvious we were going to take a financial hit. So when we were sharing with council this reduction of over $1 million, this was part of it as a way to get a handle on that quickly. At that point in time, again, we were trying to take a measured approach, so we didn't want to overreact and take too much out of the budget. But this was one of the issues that we felt with that we could reduce. Now, quite honestly, the next topic in the CARES Act, we are going to be talking about how the CARES Act can refund at least cybersecurity.
Thank you, Mark. Anything else? Okay, moving on. So we do want to talk about the council potential additions. These are items that came up in the 2020 council workshop this year. In your packet, there is a summary with detail on each of these. We provided an update in April, and this is a follow-up update. We have completed a few of these items. So citizen engagement, we created a new online comment form regarding your meetings. P4 process expansion, that was included in downtown phase 1 code amendment changes, and the vaping item was also included in the criminal code update. We are continuing to progress with work on a number of these items, particularly items relating to the ULUC, or some of the items that came up that were already related to the work plan, such as impact fees, priority-based budgeting, and revenues. We will have a few more of these come up specifically during budget conversations. I would say look for topics such as beautification with potentially median maintenance and local partnership funding coming up during the budget. A few other items are also progressing with other work the city is doing, such as See Click Fix, and we touched base on some of the data and systems thinking with our leadership framework. However, some of the council items they brought up, staff just does not have capacity at this moment in time. And so this is where we'd like to talk about that idea of a parking lot that Mark brought up early in this presentation tonight. So these are a few items that we would like to put in this parking lot and revisit thoughtfully at the 2021 council retreat and talk about their priority and where they could fit as far as staff implementing. Any questions?
I can't see. If anybody has a question, I can't see.
Karina has a question.
Go ahead.
So I understand, obviously, the term of a parking lot. I'm okay. So how do we decide on what's a parking lot? So it doesn't mean it's on a parking lot. It's something that we will focus on. It's just a matter of not right now. So thinking about, work plan here, that is more of a 2-year rolling work plan. These become the items that are, at the top of the list as we move to the next year, or, is a parking lot a catch-all of everything and anything and et cetera?
Mayor, I'll respond to that one. I think it's the former, council member. I think my recommendation is that at the retreat, the parking lot that currently is shown is kind of reflecting some of the items that the council identified back February of this year. So at least once a year at the retreat, I'd like for council to talk about the items that are perhaps a priority, but for which we don't have funding or time for whatever reason. And then, as we all know, the work plans change for all sorts of different reasons. If there is an opportunity to bring something into the conversation, to me, the parking lot was the concept for which we would start with.
Great. All right, we have Councilmember Driscoll.
Mark, would we need to add the Denver water main line going through downtown to that list? To me, that seems to be a pretty large item that we shouldn't overlook.
Actually, that's a pretty good example of something we didn't necessarily identify as a priority in the retreat, but which is going to be right in front of us here in pretty quick order and is obviously pretty significant. So yeah, good point. I would put that on the parking lot. There's some work to be done. And at this point in time, we don't, as staff, have necessarily a recommendation for it.
Is it still planned for next summer, or were you able to push that another year?
We've told them to push it another year.
Okay.
So 2022?
Yes, but there's, as Keith is quick to remind me, there's a caveat. If the water main breaks in the middle of Main Street, then Denver Water is going to come and fix that entire block. So we just have to recognize that.
Well, we've seen that we can do business with the street closed. So we're getting some practice doing that. Council, any other questions? Sama, back to you.
Great, thank you. And as I shared my screen here,
the city manager has a question or comment. Sorry.
Sure.
Sorry, Sama, can you unshare just for a second? One of the previous slides made note of a historic preservation conversation, and I sent this afternoon an email to all of council. And I hope you had an opportunity to kind of at least read the body of my email. And so in summary, a couple of weeks ago, when the city council was looking at the downtown phase 2 code amendments, it was clear from my perspective anyways, that there was a struggle around that as it related to Alamo. And so after a couple of conversations with several of you, I went ahead here and asked staff to put together a proposal about how we may take a historic preservation conversation and run it parallel to the ULUC. The original concept was to think of it more linear, that we would do the ULUC, finish that work, then go into the historic preservation piece of this. And I think what I'm sensing from council is that that original strategy may no longer work. And so I have suggested to council for us to consider a conversation on August 4th about how the historic preservation concept here may run parallel to the ULUC, and gave you an example of a staff approach to that. That's just one approach. My thought is to at least get you thinking about it, and so that the study session on August 4th, we'd have a much more robust conversation about where the council may want to take historic preservation. Now, the most important thing about that, I guess, relative to tonight, is that we have capacity to pursue the historic preservation, because we would be leaning heavily on the Historic Preservation Board and the staff within community development that's already assigned to that board. And so that's why I believe we have the capacity to take that on.
Thank you. Back to Sama.
Thank you all. Let me just share that screen one last time. And I do want to remind you, with all of the potential work plan additions, you might note there was a new column this year, or this update, that connected those to the comprehensive plan and the transportation master plan, just so you can see where those action steps line up. It's definitely part of our thought process. Okay, last slide, key takeaways. You know, we've touched on this, just a reminder, the situation is very dynamic right now. So council will be revising as needed. We'll continue to monitor the financial situation as well. And we will incorporate these recommendations into the 2021 budget recommendations. And that is our presentation.
Situation is dynamic is an understatement. Thank you. Council, let's start with questions. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I had to step away for a second, so forgive me if this was mentioned, but I just wanted to mention a bid or a DDA and see if we want to formalize some kind of work plan to approach that topic? Or what's the approach going to be?
Well, actually, it is scheduled for, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, but August 11th is a conversation around bids and DDAs. And I think your question, Mayor Pro Tem, I think is perfect for perhaps that evening after you hear the presentation and decide, is this something you want to somehow formalize?
Okay, thanks.
Great. Anyone else? All right, well, then that's the end of that item on the agenda. Council, does anyone need a break? I see no one, so let's keep on moving. So we'll move on to our second item of the night, which is the ID 20-171, which is the CARES Act update. So Council, we're going to hear from staff regarding the CARES Act funds and potential eligible costs as they relate to COVID-19. To the City Manager.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council. I think I'm gonna just turn it directly over to Tiffany Hooten and Ashley Bolton. I think they're sitting in the Aspen room here, ready to demonstrate some new technology for which we're going to touch on in the CARES Act here. So kudos to them for keeping in advance here.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Council. This evening you have the CARES Act update as an agenda item, and I'm going to go ahead and share the presentation for everyone. All right, we're just going to go ahead and jump in. The purpose this evening is to remind everyone about the CARES Act funds, the eligible use of funds, and we will touch on the phasing plan and prioritization that we have discussed with Council previously. And then we will talk about some additional recommended actions for a phase 2 of expenditures of the CARES Act funds. Another reminder, CARES Act provided funding to Arapahoe County and Jefferson County, and both counties have opted to distribute those funds, and Littleton is getting a distribution of the $4.4 million. The IGAs were approved by Council on May 19th, and a discussion on May 26th was had regarding phase 1 of the CARES Act expenditures and supported by Council. And then we also had an ordinance amending the budget for the actual expenditure of the CARES Act funds that was approved on July 7th. Use of funds necessary related to COVID-19 were not accounted for in the most recent budget as of March 27th, and they have to occur between March 1st and December 30th. We talked about a phasing plan in May, so I just kind of wanted to update where we are on that. We had our study session on May 26th. We had originally scheduled an additional study session on June 23rd. However, due to the timing and needing additional information for phase 2, we did reschedule that for this evening. Our next scheduled session is tentatively for September 8th. So that we can give an update on where we are on expenditures that we have already spent and an additional expenditure. I would say that we are anticipating a potential additional Council study session in August. There are a couple of items that we need to maybe address sooner rather than later, depending on the type of expenditure. And so we may be coming to Council in August with some additional requests and information. And then we will also have a final study session and follow up on December 15th on all of the CARES Act funds. A reminder on the prioritization, we want to make sure we align with Council goals and then also be cognizant of our reopening and guiding principles. And then also taking into account Littleton RISE objectives. And significantly, one item is making sure we're not being redundant with the county or state initiatives. That could be related to business grants or other opportunities. And then also making sure that we're looking at partnership opportunities. And then I think the last thing that we want to just continue to be aware of is some contingency planning in case there is a second wave that might occur related to COVID. So this evening, we are recommending a phase 2 Part of this is going to include some additional economic support that was already included in phase 1. If you recall, we had some information related to phase 1 business grants. We also did a phase 2 recently, and this would be a phase 3, but those are not additional funding. That's already been accounted for in the 1.182 million. And we have Denise Stevens with us this evening, and I'm going to go ahead and hand the presentation over to her so she can kind of highlight and give you some information related to that phase 3 program that we're looking at.
Good evening, Council. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here with you. Okay, hang on just one second. So, as we mentioned, can you all see?
Yes.
Okay. As we mentioned, we, in the previous study session, we were working with Arapahoe County, the cities of Centennial, Inglewood, and Greenwood Village, and Aurora to try to put together Littleton CARES Act funding, which is phase 3 for us. And in that process, what we were going to do and have done is get Arapahoe County to agree that what we'd come up with as a group would be basically meeting all the standards, and it would be very easy to get reimbursement for this program. So what we're proposing and what has already been pre-approved by Arapahoe County is a 2-part grant program. And we would have $375,000 total funding available. And part 1 of that would be the business interruption grant, which is similar to what we've already put out with phases 1 and 2. And it would be used for business operations and lease, mortgage payments, payroll, inventory, and so forth. And the award could be up to $10,000 per application. The other piece of this would be business infrastructure and PPE grant reimbursement. So that could be up to $20,000, and that would include obviously reimbursement for any PPE that expenditures that had already been made. People would submit their receipts and be reimbursed for that. Or if they made major infrastructure improvements based on operations under COVID, then they could be reimbursed for that as well. So what we did is we looked at every city and their various grant eligibility standards. And interestingly enough, Arapahoe County looked at what we did in phase 1 and adopted most of that along with the cities. So basically we're going to offer this at the same levels as we did before, same eligibility requirements. These would be those licensed with the city and those that have a physical address within the city limits, those in good standing, for-profit, privately held businesses. This time we're going to allow 1 to 100 full-time positions, and that the business has been forced to temporarily close or dramatically limit operations due to COVID. The things that are not eligible would be home-based occupations, national chains, the exception being any locally owned franchise that may qualify. No publicly traded, I'm sorry, there's an error there, but no publicly traded companies and businesses deriving more than 1/3 of their gross annual revenue from legal gambling. All the marijuana businesses, any business engaged in illegal activity, any sexually oriented business would also be excluded. So then the basic prohibited uses of funds would be the same as we have done in phases 1 and 2. And we had our legal department review the terms and conditions, and the county signed off on this. And we have built the application so we can initiate this as soon as and if council decides they want to move ahead with that. So any questions?
Continue.
This is Karina. I have questions.
Oh, Karina.
Can you guys see me? I had to switch computers.
Yep. Now we do.
Okay. So it sounds like this has already been proposed to the county and that they've approved it. So if we were to make any changes, what would be the implications of that? Not only from the county, but is this something that we've agreed? I think I heard you say we've agreed to this with other jurisdictions. So not only do we have to get the approval from the county, but we have to navigate and negotiate with the other jurisdictions that align to this?
Actually, what we would have to do is probably resubmit any changes that we propose to the county. The other cities have acknowledged that each of us have unique needs within our jurisdictions, and so we wouldn't need to get buy-in from the cities we've worked with. Everybody acknowledges each entity might have different standards that they want to live up to.
So this is kind of the basic outline?
Yes.
And
correct.
then we can add some additional qualifiers, for example, or some additional entities? Can we do things like that?
Yes, and but I will tell you that a couple of things that the county was pretty adamant about was that this particular phase would not include nonprofits. And the cities were hoping that, like Jefferson County, that Arapahoe County would use its CARES Act funding to launch a nonprofit reimbursement program. And so it wasn't included in this. However, Inglewood has just submitted a request for county pre-approval for a program that would be exclusively for the benefit of nonprofits. Their price tag on this is $50,000. So part of this would be thinking about what amount of money and number of nonprofits might need that money. So what would actually be effective? So if one of the concerns is providing some funding to nonprofits, then we would probably approach that as a separate item.
So where I was going with where my head was going was, organizations like the Littleton Business Chamber or the historic downtown Littleton Merchants or some other, I'll even say South Metro Chamber, because they are an organization. I think they're a nonprofit. I don't know what their classifications are. Despite their classification, their purpose, and oftentimes the work that they do is to bring together programs for all businesses to benefit. So not too unlike what we did for Weekends on Main, instead of each individual business now having to go out and get chairs or whatever else they may have to do, if an organization can take on that role, it's essentially one, more efficient and likely much more cost effective when it's grouped together as opposed to everyone having their little piece. So can we position some component of this that allows that as an option? I mean, we can talk about the details there and obviously give you the time to work through that and bring back to council. But I think that's a really great opportunity for us and for our businesses.
We can certainly entertain anything that council wants to look at in regard to this. So the answer is yes.
Okay. So I think that is something we should look at. I think that allows us to leverage scale and for some of these programs to take on, kind of longer term sustainability as opposed to just individual actions.
Great.
Mayor, I have a suggestion in response to that. I would suggest that we take the nonprofit piece of this, Karina, I think what you're trying to describe, chambers and others, and pull it apart and away from this particular piece that's in front of you here on the screen. So this is for profit, and this is this phase 3 that the council could consider, Littleton Cares Business Recovery Grant. In Tiffany's presentation here in a few minutes, she is going to talk about an allocation that we would make to nonprofits. And if council's interested, we could look at business chambers and Downtown Merchants Association, those who official nonprofits, and how they could benefit from the CARES Act.
How would you recommend it? I think it's, these are organizations we should look at as well. I'm a little concerned that there's a lot of money being spent and soon all this money is going to run out. So I just want to be cautious of how much we're earmarking from one area to another.
Agreed.
Great. All right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Carol.
Go ahead, Carol.
I would like to be very cautious about considering the organizations just mentioned as nonprofits, in the sense that we think of nonprofits as organizations that help people in need. They're very, very different type of organizations. The express purpose, per their own literature, of the Littleton Business Chamber is to affect and fund Littleton elections. And that, to me, is not a valid purpose for a nonprofit. That is not a nonprofit. That's a political action group. We've been treating it, often hoping it will behave as a business chamber. But if you look at the literature it put out during its own forum and during the last election, their one purpose is to gather money and support candidates for council. And they supported some of the council candidates in the last two elections, and they did not support other council candidates. That's all.
Right. And I think one of the qualifiers that eliminates a group isn't a political organization. So that we always need to keep those kind of things in mind, definitely. And we'll go to Council Member Milliman.
So thanks for that presentation, Tiffany and Denise. I have a question about the business grant. Did I read correctly that for the business, oh my gosh, the business interpretation grant, it's $10,000. Is that per business? And if so, in our first round of grant monies, would those businesses that received the $2,500 grants, a couple of months ago, would they be eligible for this, either of these grants, the interruption or the infrastructure and PPE grant?
Well, that's an excellent question. And I don't think the county has any objections to various business entities applying for more than one of these grants. And the grant levels are up to that amount. So business interruption would be up to $10,000, depending on what evidence they proved of economic injury. One of the questions we would ask would be, what other assistance have you received? And of course, we already are tracking the phases 1 and 2. So we would know what people had already gotten and be able to compare the newer submission to what they'd already received. But the county doesn't seem to be opposed to duplicate awards.
Okay, thanks. That's super helpful. Yeah, and
All right, we have was that it? Was that it, Kelly?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm super supportive of a separate nonprofit grant model. Thanks.
Okay. All right, Council Member Elrod, was there anybody else that was going to have a question in there? I don't see, so go ahead, Council Member Elrod.
I'd like the opportunity to, this is the first time that we're seeing this. I'd like the opportunity to review it a little bit further. In particular, what I'm looking for is, the first time we did this, it was, there was urgency. We were in a situation and our businesses were in a situation where they were in between the PPP phases, et cetera. And I really want us to be a lot more strategic here. I think there has been some additional qualifiers, but I'd like us to go just a little bit deeper and think about retailers specifically, storefronts. I mean, something that we've talked a lot about the character of downtown just recently. And let me tell you, nothing kills character in a downtown like empty storefronts and empty window displays. And so you know, right now businesses maybe are not all created equal. There is something to be said for ensuring our retail businesses, not only for their sales tax impact, but also from the presence and character that they convey to our city is incredibly critical. When we think about small businesses, we have to be very clear of what that means. It's not just how many people are employed, but also think about chef-owned restaurants as opposed to a restaurant, a franchise. So I think there's a missed opportunity here that is an important one, that we really become very strategic of where this grant and the support is going to not only help our businesses succeed, but the other value that they create, vibrancy in particular corridors potentially, or critical retailers for whatever reasons we want to define that. So I'd like us to get a little bit more strategic on this.
All right, great. Council Mayor Pro Tem Millen.
Mark, is this, and I certainly support doing some version of another round of business grant funding, and I also support doing a separate round of nonprofit funding. I think that's appropriate. As this pandemic drags on, and as people in different parts of the country and different parts of the state are starting to feel an increasing inability to pay for their housing, are we seeing that happen in Littleton? Is there any need to talk about the possibility of essentially rent relief at this point with the CARES Act money?
The conversations that I've been part of with other city managers and county staff, I think we've all agreed that the county's in the best position to kind of manage rental assistance through the CARES Act specifically. Now, they may work through the different housing authorities with each city, but our conclusion really is largely based on the fact that they have the infrastructure in place. The county does. They have the staff, they have the expertise. In our particular case, we obviously don't have a housing authority that's directly part of the city, so we have to rely upon South Metro housing options. So I think,
as far as you know, is our South Metro housing options in touch with the counties?
I don't have an update. We certainly made them aware of it here a few weeks ago, but I can't answer that with any accuracy. Okay. But I'm pretty confident we do have some impact by some people relative to COVID and rental issues.
Okay, thanks.
And Kelly Milliman and I did talk about that yesterday, and she was going to get a hold of the housing authority to talk to them. Kelly, did you get a chance to talk to them, or were you there? Looks like Kelly stepped away. Yeah, because I know Scott, part of your response to you is that I know Chaffa has a lot of money too, but they're going to work through our housing authority too. I'll give Corey a call tomorrow too, just to see what's up.
Sounds good. I've got coincidentally a call scheduled with them too coming up, so thanks.
All right, cool. All right. Any other questions, council? All right. Where are we now, Mark?
Let me unmute myself here. So I did hear a suggestion from one council member that they would like to have more time, and I fully appreciate that. We certainly recognized that a couple of weeks ago here when we talked about it before. So if the majority of council would like that, I can place this on the agenda, say even next week, or even some other point in time. But I think the question will always be is whatever the requirements we want to look at, obviously it has to be connected to the qualifications of the CARES Act and whether or not those businesses who could apply have a direct connection to COVID. Other than that, I'm certainly open to how the council wants to approach this, and Mayor would look to make sure that we have a majority who's interested in pursuing that, say in another meeting.
Are we on any type of time constraint, Mark?
We are not. I think this is, as Councilmember Elrod pointed out, maybe in the first month or so of this issue, I think there was a sense of urgency. I think now we probably have a little bit more time to kind of respond to this. I would suggest that we try to be as prompt as we can.
Great. All right.
So, Mayor, is there a majority?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're looking for.
I was just say I second that.
I'm sure we have a majority on that. Council, is there any reason we don't want to have the city come back to us with information? I don't see it. I don't think we're opposed. I think it'd be a good idea to put it on our study session.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. What is our next item? Where are we now? Are we through with that item? The CARES Act?
No, I think we finished through part of it, and I think that we're looking here now for Tiffany to complete it. The piece of it was probably one of the more significant pieces.
Great, thank you.
Yes. So the next one is the recommended phase 2, and the total that we currently have is 1.37 million, sorry. And a greater portion of that is related to public health expenditures. And the largest one is the City Council chamber reconfiguration. And we have a dollar amount of $990,000. And we do have Keith Reister here, who is happy to speak to the council chamber reconfiguration.
Thanks, Tiffany. So the $990,000 number is a ballpark portion. So the situation we're facing is that we don't have any public meeting rooms that can accommodate having a city council chamber with public participation in the same room to meet social distancing requirements. There aren't any exceptions to that in the city. And so the CARES Act, we had originally set aside 1.8 or so million in impact fees to address capacity issues in the Littleton Center this year. And as part of the design process, we're going to look at how we might address the council chamber in phase 2 or maybe phase 3. With the CARES Act funding, it provides us a leverage point. I followed up with a question today to everyone, and we have some challenges here because we have to get everything completed by December 30th, and design and pricing has to still be done. And we have a range of costs that go from an estimate of basically $1.2 million to 2.1. And I alluded earlier to when I got asked the question about efficiency systems in the buildings. Of the $2.1 million estimate, $800,000 of that is HVAC and electrical systems, because most of those in the Littleton Center haven't been touched in 3 decades. So we're trying to pin down a better estimate. We're still working with the design and the construction team to do that, but we keep giving them a moving target. So in the next, I'm hopeful that in the next 3 weeks, we will be able to come to you and give you an option of what might be included in that project to move forward to make that happen. I also included a sketch plan that's kind of risen to the top of a reconfiguration of the chamber that would allow it to accommodate council, be a multi-purpose room, allowing us to split into subrooms and really expand your capabilities to have study sessions in there, and also upgrade the AV and broadcast as well. So I'm more than happy to entertain any questions about that, because I didn't really provide a great deal of detail.
All right, if we can get back to the others screen to see if council has any questions. Council, do we have any questions at this point? We'll start with Councilmember Elrod, then Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to look at your response, Keith or Sam, of this packet. I know there were some sketches as well. So if you can help me reconcile all the numbers, Keith. So I heard 2.1 million represents what?
So we have a potential range of estimates for the reconfiguration of the city council chamber that currently range from 1.2 million to 2.1 million. But I can't button that down any closer than that yet because we're basically at like 15% design. And our first estimate that we got based on a configuration of the room was 2.1, including design fees, of which 40% of that was the cost of HVAC and electrical improvements because they haven't been touched in so long. So we're going to be working with the design team to see if there's some options between those two. The problem is some of those options would preclude future work on some other things like the HVAC, and so we don't want to box ourselves out of that. And we're just at too early a design. This was not the sequencing of the design for the project, but because the CARES Act situation came up, we've had to rearrange that timeline and really put some pressure on our teams to do that.
And so, but the CARES Act funding, so if the range is somewhere between 1.2 to 2.1 million, and this is again specific for the council chambers, how come the CARES Act money is only earmarked for the 990,000? So does whatever is over the 990 have to come out of something else? So why are we capped at 990?
We've had a lot of discussion between the city manager's office, finance, and public works. And I believe, I'll just speak from my view on this. I believe that the 990 is the number because we've tried to balance the competing needs and requests that are falling upon the CARES Act. Because if you take the look of the requests that we can come up with that fits the CARES Act number, when you include public works, the community grants we just talked about, for example, and IT alone, we're at $9 million. So part of it was a balancing act to leverage the money as much as possible for benefit. So that's where we came up with the 990.
Okay, so the 9 million, so this is something that I think would be great. I understand that you guys are kind of prioritizing and working through that and filtering through that 9 million ask, but it would be good to have visibility to that, Mark, to have an understanding of what are some of the things that we are already recognizing we're not going to be able to leverage CARES money for, especially given that, you know, we're kind of taking pieces and we're saying we haven't figured out the whole 4 million yet, but you know, you're allowing us to make a decision of what we should spend or how we should invest this money, but we are not getting visibility to what we're not able to invest on based on these decisions. So if we can have visibility to that, I'd appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right, City Manager, then we'll go to Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, just a quick comment here. Yeah, I fully appreciate that. And I think, you know, some of this allocation we're talking about this evening here has more of a sense of urgency, say the business grants. Some of this that's related to the remodel is just simply a point in time for which we can come back to council and show you a more complete picture of not only the building, but all the other requests, the 9 million, so to speak. And so I think that's going back to Tiffany's presentation in the very beginning. She talked about another meeting in August where Keith will have a little bit more time to kind of bring back some cost estimates on how CARES Act and the impact fees together will solve a lot of our building challenges. And then at the same time, we'll get to see more of the complete picture of IT and the rest. So I think the August meeting is probably what you're asking for.
Great. All right, thank you. Let's go to Mayor Pro Tem.
I had the same questions as Karina, so I'm good.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah. And Keith did put out an excellent response to several council member questions. So when you get a chance to look at it, it's a lot longer than what we want to hear right now, but it was a very good response. Thank you. Any other questions, council? All right. Tiffany?
All right, we're gonna go to the next one. So the next recommendation is $250,000 related to audio and visual enablement in multiple rooms throughout a number of city buildings. And I have Ashley Bolton with me here in the Aspen room to kind of show you what this might get us.
Hi, Council. So we thought the best way to try to describe what we are talking about with the audio visual improvements is actually to show you what we're talking about. We've gone ahead and done a proof of concept here in the Aspen conference room, which is right next to Kelly Nardi, or right across from Kelly Nardi's office on the second floor of the city center, and have enabled basically what Zoom calls a Zoom room. And so this technology actually integrates with Zoom. So we are actually using this tablet here to actually join the meeting tonight. And this enables us to do a hybrid meeting where we can have people on site, social distanced, also working with folks remotely. In the short term, this will enable us to create additional social distanced working space for employees as we reopen. And in the event that we do have a second wave and do have to have more employees remote again, it will also enable us to more effectively collaborate with our citizens and our remote employees for the essential folks that do have to be here to be able to also communicate with those folks remotely. So you can see this is not a fake background. We actually really are in the conference room, so did want to point that out. Longer term, we would also be looking to try to set up these Zoom rooms into our other buildings, including the courthouse for the defensive driving classroom, the library for some of their meeting spaces, as well as the museum and their education wing, which could also allow us to do some hybrid programming and trainings to be able to bring the audience, even when COVID is behind us and we do have moved into our new normal, being able to provide our citizens with virtual programming in addition with folks who are on site. We've come up with a $250,000 initial estimate, knowing that some of the rooms are going to be small, like the Aspen conference room that we're in, but we also do have a lot of complex, larger spaces. The community room, for example, that you guys have had exposure to downstairs really requires an expensive microphone, for example, to use to really get that quality of sound for audio in a larger room. So we know some of our rooms are going to be more expensive. We also have a couple of conference rooms, such as our police training rooms, which is also our emergency operations center, that also are divisible spaces. And so in order to outfit the technology in those rooms to function as two separate rooms and then as a single solid room together, those rooms will be more expensive to outfit. So we think the $250,000 investment will really help us get a majority of the rooms. But similar to what Keith is going through, we have to get into the design phase to really understand what that will look like. And so we'd like to circle back with a list of the rooms that we will look to prioritize once we understand the true costs, and knowing that we may not have to outfit them completely with the full, like for the example of the divisible conference room, we have one of those rooms over in the museum, the education room. We may not have to add all of that technology to enable the two separate rooms and then the single combined room, but we won't know that until we actually get into the design. So that essentially is the ask for this investment. Are there any questions we can answer for you?
We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem.
Question for Mark. If we're investing in an ability or an additional ability for staff to work remotely long term, would they be allowed to do that? I could see that creating any number of potential benefits, decreased burden on our facilities, less traffic in the city, and on and on. Is that anything that's being considered?
Actually, it is. I think that I'm confident all of us recognize that the workplace has probably changed forever as a result of COVID-19. I think not only just for us as a city organization, but for our citizens as well, and how they engage us. So I think I don't have an answer yet on exactly what remote working might look like for us, but I think the leadership team clearly recognizes we're going to have to kind of rethink how we approach this. And I think this technology, quite honestly, can facilitate that here much more effectively.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you. And anyone else? Karina? You're muted.
Yeah,
There we go.
trying. So thank you. That was great. Actually, I think this is a very welcoming way to work to connect with our constituents and things like that. As personal as you can get over a computer. So I think that's great. So the Aspen Room has a lovely picture of aspens behind you. I sure hope that's from our collection of paintings. Can you please continue?
I don't believe so, but
Kelly Nardi can confirm. This essentially is her home away from home.
So I would like to ensure, Mark, that we connect with Tim and Jennifer and the Fine Arts Board to really integrate our inventory of artwork that we have purchased as a city as a way to, not spend the money on a new painting there, and also to celebrate part of the history that comes with the various purchases that we've made through the years.
All right.
Will do.
Council, anyone else? Councilmember Millman.
Have some of that artwork in our own houses behind us. Look how boring.
Yeah, really. A lot of angles there, a lot of angles. Okay, Tiffany.
sure. So the next one that we have on our list is related to the courts and some improvements that we want to implement over there. And I will ask Ashley to talk with you about those.
Sure. So these are our hardware-related technology expenses as well. And when we reopened the courts last month, we've given them the option to either do a video, an audio, or an in-person hearing. Our in-person hearing equipment is very old and really requires an update. We've kind of cobbled together a solution using some propped up old laptops. And we really need to reinvest in upgrading our microphones, adding some web cameras, adding the mixer, and upgrading our Liberty audio recording device. So this ask is to upgrade those so that we can actually modernize that equipment and continue with these great offerings that we have been able to do to complement the audio and the video piece in addition to the in-person, and also facilitate the social distancing aspect of having the judge be able to be in another area of the courthouse to enable those to happen. In addition, we would also like to upgrade the defensive driving classroom, as I said, and actually create that into a Zoom room where we could also offer that as a virtual training option for citizens should the pandemic continue, and even after that, if it's successful, into the future.
Great. And by the way, your technology just has you as the Aspen Room now.
We took ourselves off.
Yeah.
You have the technology.
Yeah, but we're still here.
We're here.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. So are there any questions specifically related to the court improvements? Nope.
Great.
Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and move forward. The last one that we have noted here is nonprofit assistance, and this is kind of in response to some requests from some local nonprofit organizations. And I believe we shared some information with council regarding requests or some areas of focus for some of our nonprofits. And so I just kind of wanted to highlight some of the things, some of the feedback that we received from them. And they did talk about 3 initial areas of focus for the city. One of them being a communications campaign. So trying to help communicate with families of resources that are available in our community. And then a second one is kind of addressing the homelessness and the housing situation in the city. And I think that one's going to take a little bit of more discussion for council and for the nonprofits to kind of help us really understand what direction they're going in that area. And then the third area is related to childcare. at home schooling, trying to, provide some opportunities for parents to work while keeping their kids safe in the area. And so we wanted to go ahead and propose to council to kind of set aside $100,000 related to these nonprofit areas, and certainly welcome feedback and can open it up for discussion. We talked earlier, council's interested in providing some nonprofit funding to some organizations as well, so we could kind of couple that with a discussion on the nonprofit area or nonprofit funding. There were a number of organizations and nonprofits in the city that were reached out to. Catherine Roy with Love Inc. is actually the one who kind of spearheaded this, and she reached out to organizations such as Break Bread, Doctors Care, the Graceful Cafe, Littleton Family Services, and Love Inc., North Littleton Promise, the South Early Learning Center, and St. Mary's Food Pantry, to kind of get some feedback from them on what areas they're looking at for potential need of services from the city.
I have a question.
Karina has a question.
Thank you. Or a comment, rather. As I had mentioned, I think last council meeting, we have a survey that's going out to the various nonprofits as it relates to the creative industries and cultural entities in the city of Littleton. So we expect to have that back, I think maybe by the end of this month. So that's some of the surveying and questions that we're working through as well through the lab. So how do we bring that into, so would that fall into this nonprofit category? Because they have been, those organizations, as you know, they are completely shut down. So where do they fit into some of this?
Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they can fit in wherever council would like, I guess is the short answer. I think, based on the previous conversation here, I think if there is another category for which the council wants to allocate some funding, we certainly can look at a whole series of nonprofits, again, as long as it's tied to the impacts of COVID-19. I would like to thank Catherine Roy, specifically with Love Inc. She did a lot of work trying to coordinate a lot of the other nonprofits. And so the packet that you've got is really a reflection of her work. So I think there, in my view, there's somewhat of a sense of urgency related to some of those nonprofits who have a direct impact with people who have been affected here, homeless or whatever it might be. I think another group of nonprofits that, as you suggest, council member, certainly could be part of that consideration. And if we're going to be talking about a phase 3 here at another council meeting, we certainly can bring this forward and have a larger discussion about what you would like to include. And I'd also would mention the Town Hall Arts Center has also been affected by this. As you will remember, they are actually in our building. We subsidize some of that operation. And so they have directly been affected by COVID-19. And so we do have some information from them that could certainly be part of this category. So if my suggestion is that if there is a broader interest on the part of council for including these other nonprofits, we can certainly roll that into the conversation with business grants.
Yes, thank you.
Tiffany?
Sorry, I thought Kelly Milliman had a question.
Oh, I can't see the council, so I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I do have a question. We still have and I don't know if this is, I don't know. I'm going to throw it out there. We still have a little bit of money. We have some money left from the LIFT funds. Is that correct?
Well, yes, the short answer is that we've been reimbursed for the money we did spend as the first business grant. However, if you'll remember in the very beginning, staff had always considered the return of the LIFT money as part of the general fund conversation, balance of the budget. So we're trying to look to the CARES Act to fund much of the COVID-19 impact as possible. In the end, it is council's decision about how they want to spend money.
I'm looking at the total amount of that grant for the nonprofits is $100,000, and I know there's not as many nonprofits as there are businesses in the city of Littleton, but they do provide such a huge service and a benefit to any number of different population groups within the city. Is $100,000 enough initially?
Fair question, and maybe not. I think that if the council wants to have a broader conversation of the other nonprofits that could benefit from the CARES Act, my guess is that you'll probably see that $100,000 is not going to go very far. But we do have flexibility in the total amount. So this is just an allocation. I think if you're going to have another conversation here, the council may conclude, and we could have some recommendations as staff on how much you may want to add to this allocation.
Carrie, I have a comment.
Okay, Pam.
I would support that. I would like to see us especially support nonprofits that will help our Littleton families directly in addition to our businesses. So I would like to see some options that staff would present when the appropriate time.
And as Mark had mentioned, Love Inc. is Catherine has gathered information from all those organizations, and they're all located in Littleton. Great. Any other questions, comments? Tiffany, was that your last slide? Did you finish it?
Close.
Good.
We did want to talk about one new development that we had just within the last couple of days after the packet went out. And so we did want to talk about the cybersecurity piece of this. And Ashley Bolton is going to talk about that with you.
Great.
Yeah, so we've been finding out, I think, more and more about CARES Act every single day. And we found out late last week that software subscriptions actually for a year would actually be eligible for reimbursement under the CARES Act. And one of the areas that we've been trying to get more robust in is around cybersecurity, in particular in this case, around email phishing attempts. And I think all of you guys are pretty familiar with the number of phishes that we get. And actually, even our cybersecurity awareness partner, KnowBe4, has even said over the COVID period that they have seen an increase by 6,000% in terms of the number of phishes that now come basically after us. So we now, knowing that we potentially could, ask for reimbursement for an annual subscription, would like to invest in additional email phishing filtering protection. It's technically called advanced threat protection, to really help us build that filter and keep out more of the phishes. So that is what this ask is for.
Good. All right.
Okay.
It's your last item.
Yes. So just a recap of what we've talked about this evening. The allocation is about $4.4 million to Littleton. Phase 1 included $1,182,000 in expenditures. And in the council communication, I mentioned $200,000 of this is pending approval by the county. And we actually got an update, and $75,000 of that was related to the phone enhancement system or phone system enhancements, and the county did approve that yesterday. So we will be moving forward with that expenditure from phase 1. And then the second one was related to the weekends on Main Street, and staff did follow up with some answers to some questions from the county. So we anticipate having an answer from them within the next couple of days. Phase 2 included $1,370,000. If you add the $50,000 that we just learned about the last couple of days, that brings it up to $1,420,000. And that would leave $1,807,413 available to address future needs. And I know we've talked multiple times about a study session in August. So I think we have a number of items that we would be bringing back to council in that study session, including the large list of over $9 million of original requests for CARES Act funding. And so I think we will go ahead and get that scheduled. There's a lot of interest in that. And so that's just kind of a recap of where we are after phase 2 of the CARES Act expenditure funding.
Right.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I know it's already 9:15 or almost 9. We do have one additional item that we do want to put on council's radar, and Ashley and I are gonna talk about that. It's a pretty large expenditure, but it's very important related to COVID and where we are today for our systems. And so Ashley and I wanted to kind of talk to you about an ERP system for this city.
So I know
ERP?
Meaning enterprise resource planning, not early retirement program, just to differentiate the two.
Okay.
I know we were supposed to have an IT study session earlier this year that COVID had delayed, where we were going to get more into detail in terms of the existing state of our systems. And I think we brought it up at the January offsite that we had. I think Scott in particular was asking about the state of our financial and HR systems, for example. And to be honest, they are pretty primitive. They're not integrated. They cause a lot of manual work as a result of that. And so we had been hoping to talk with you at the IT study session about where we're trying to go in terms of trying to move towards a fully integrated ERP system. We are finding more and more out about CARES Act again and how we could creatively look to use some of those monies. And knowing that we, just like Keith and the facilities projects that he's looking to do, are up against a December 30th deadline, we are looking at creative ways to see if we could at least try to start on that journey and potentially look at trying to put into milestones a project to get us started on this ERP journey to invest in upgrading our HR and payroll system would be the first one actually targeted on our list. So given that this is kind of late breaking requirements, that we're understanding that some of these things may be possible, and also knowing that basically daylight is burning and we are getting closer and closer to this December 30th target date, and knowing that our next study session may not be till August and September, which we felt would be too late for something of this magnitude, we did just want to talk about this evening and see if you would have an appetite for allowing us to follow up with a memo of how we could come back with different dates in terms of what you could expect and what we would deliver at each date in terms of trying to start on this journey to see if it might be something you'd be willing to spend some of the remaining $1.8 million on to help us bite off a chunk of where we ultimately know we need to go in order to create this foundation here to truly make us a data-driven city.
All right. Okay, so I think Councilmember Fay has a question.
I have a comment. I am very concerned about the fairness when we are giving money away. We've had suggestions tonight to give money to businesses, to give rent assistance to people, and to give money to nonprofits. And we could give away an immense amount of money compared to our usual amount of money we have. I would like the criteria for giving those things away to come before council for us to scrutinize what our criteria is, how much we have already given those entities, and what we expect to get back from it before we actually give the money away. That.
Okay, good comment. Councilmember Grove?
Everybody wants a better system, and we don't want to be far behind in terms of the data and our reporting. But I think there's some more immediate needs beyond just our businesses, like the nonprofits we talked about, like our citizens that are having trouble doing basic things like getting food and all that kind of stuff. So I would like to not see a lion's share go to an upgraded system. A portion might be okay, but I also would like to look at more than $100,000 maybe going to these nonprofits.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other council members, questions, comments? Elrod?
One of the questions I've always posed to Mark with all of these is, are we making an investment that we will have a positive return? So when we look at systems, when we look at infrastructure, some of the things that Keith has shared with us, and absolutely to Carol and Pam's point of when we are essentially investing in these organizations, these systems or infrastructure, I just want to make sure that it truly is an investment and that there is a return. So to use the proposal from Ashley and Tiffany, this is an infrastructure investment. Will it help us to operate more efficiently? Will we be able to manage our costs better? So I am fully supportive of understanding what the criteria is and ensuring that there is a long-term return and sustainability to these investments.
Great. All right. Anyone else? I see nothing. All right, City Manager.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. I appreciate that. We got some great direction there, and we'll look to the August meeting here for a much more detailed conversation about some of these topics. So with that, Mayor, I think I'm going to turn it back over to you. I think that's done here for the scheduled item. I do have under the city manager comments an issue here to deal with on the Tri-County Health, but look to you to manage the agenda.
Great. Well, that's where we are. I'll have a few updates that I'll give at the end. I think you had a couple others, but I think we are down now to the Tri-County Health mask mandate.
Okay.
So Reed, who's going to start this out?
Well, Mayor, and how about if I start and I will let the city attorney kind of fill in the blanks here. Does that
sounds good?
Reed? I'd be more than happy to turn it over to you, Reed, if you'd like to jump in. All right.
Well, as council all knows, on July 8th, Tri-County Health Department voted in favor of requiring masks to be worn by individuals, both going into businesses as well as in the outdoors when social distancing cannot occur. And so essentially this matter was asked to be placed tonight under city manager's comments to get guidance from city council to determine whether or not city council was interested in potentially opting out of this order. It actually goes into effect on July 24th, 2020. And we did have at least 2 council members that wanted to discuss this matter tonight regarding the masks, as well as to learn what sort of options city council may have going forward. So I don't know if council has specific questions for me as it relates to this. When we were kind of brainstorming, if you will, by we, the city manager and myself, regarding options, we came up with essentially 3 options. Well, 4 options. 1, the city can do nothing. And if the city does nothing, then we'll be under the public health order, Tri-County's public health order mandating masks. 2, city council could provide direction to me to prepare a resolution opting out of Tri-County's mandated mask order. Option 3 would be if a decision can't be made tonight, the city manager could put this on at a later date for a study session, perhaps get someone from Tri-County or those persons with potentially more knowledge in the situation to speak to council on the issue. Or 4, an option would be if for some reason city council wanted to opt out of this, thought maybe this mask mandate was overbroad, but they wanted to come out with their own mandate. Perhaps just by way of example, council may think that, no, you don't need masks in all businesses, but perhaps you need a mask in a grocery store. And so let's come out with our own order. That is a fourth option. And so that's what we're here for tonight. Mark, I don't know if you have any additional comments.
No, I think Reed, I think you've done well with that. I think the question is just where council may want to go. The purpose of putting it on the city manager's comment is whether or not it's worthy for some kind of further action. So there wasn't really intended to provide any more data than just setting up the question.
All right, I'm going to open it up to council at this point. We'll start with Councilmember Driscoll.
Yeah, can we make a fifth option or sixth option where we business as usual, meaning, you know, we currently have a mask in place when walking through restaurants, you know, sticking with what's been going on most recently. Is that even an option?
That would most likely be that first option where we would opt out of Tri-County's order and just essentially revert back to what the state's existing order is right now, which is what we see currently.
Councilmember, is that through Councilmember Driscoll?
Yep.
Councilmember Elrod?
I was one of the council members that wanted to bring this up for discussion because my reaction to it is, what are the implications of this to our city? So I think it's important to what just Pat asked for clarification, because I think there's confusion that opting out means that now you shouldn't wear a mask. I think it's important that the message remains clear that what opting out means is that we're reverting to the state orders, which still very, very, very strongly encourages us to wear masks. And so I would like to take it to our next regular meeting, which is next Tuesday, so that we can bring some of this clarity and information to the public and even amongst ourselves. And one of the comments, you know, a lot of what we are hearing and seeing is that this is a data-based decision. Well, the data-based decision, I think some of the data that's important to look at is what Tri-County Health actually has for the city of Littleton. If you guys haven't, the website is data.tchd.org/COVID-19/Littleton. Here's what's really important to understand and impart Tri-County's allowing the option to opt out, because there obviously is a recognition that not everything is the same. When we look at the city of Littleton, we have not had a hospitalization since May 22nd. And when we look at the city of Littleton, we're only 1.8% of the cases. And when I brought this up to Dr. Douglas today at the Tri-County meeting, I asked him, I'm like, are these numbers correct? Because this is incredible. I knew that Littleton was an anomaly in all of the Tri-County area, but we are doing incredibly well. And he said, yes, they're accurate. So these are the things, and it's not to, again, we're not making a decision tonight, but I think these are the discussions and information we need to take to the public. And whatever decision we make next Tuesday, then at least we're making it with our local knowledge, and it is, and that's what the county has, Tri-County has afforded all municipalities, is to look at the local level and make the decision at the local level. So in our responsibility and in fairness to our community, and per the challenge that was presented to us last week by former council member Kyle Schlachter, let's bring this discussion to our community.
All right, Council Mayor Pro Tem, and then B. Millivan.
I feel pretty strongly about doing nothing and following the mandate. And I understand we've got this scheduled for just 15 minutes.
We can go until 10 and then we can figure it out after that, if you like.
You know, I may ask for a little more significant amount of time on the second round robin. I've got some pretty extensive thoughts prepared. It takes about 8 minutes to get through it. I don't want to ask council for that kind of time if it's not necessary. So let's see where council stands.
No, why don't you go ahead and get them out of the way, then we can get to the other folks. Hopefully be a bit shorter, but let's hear yours.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to settle in for a minute.
Settle in.
Yeah, all right. As I mentioned, I strongly support following the Tri-County mandate. I understand that people feel on edge right now, and I understand why they feel on edge. This is an incredibly difficult time for a lot of people and for a lot of communities. I think this makes it that much more important that we take a step back and try to make sure that our decisions are not based on emotion, including fear, but instead are based on the best reasons we can articulate. At the top of that list for me is that the mask mandate is a public health decision. That is where it properly belongs. It requires expertise in virology, epidemiology, and the sophisticated data analysis and modeling tied to those things. City Council does not have anything close to the expertise to make sound public health decisions on this unprecedented pandemic. All we can make is a political decision, and that is inappropriate and inadequate here. I hear elected officials in Tri-County Health's jurisdiction saying with complete confidence in the press and elsewhere that rates are low enough, voluntary mask wearing is high enough, the virus doesn't do this or that to the human body, it is or isn't transmitted this way or that way, and the implications and what all of this means for the future of the pandemic. There is a well-known, well-studied, very common error of human belief formation called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where novices dramatically overestimate the knowledge they have on difficult subject areas. This is not the time for that. Tri-County Health knows way more than we do about this. I would add that nationwide, letting politics overrule public health decisions is leading to exploding infection rates and a fast-growing number of second shutdown orders like those in California that no one wants and that pose a profound economic threat. For what it's worth, moreover, public health officials, including Tri-County, are effectively unanimous in saying that masks are a simple, effective way to meaningfully stem the spread of COVID. America is a product of the Enlightenment. We value science. Ben Franklin's electricity experiments are an iconic image of our founding era. We do not politicize science. We are guided by it, and throughout our history, we have been made far stronger for it. I also don't agree that Tri-County Health being appointed rather than elected invalidates their vote. A huge body of critical public safety law in America is made by unelected regulatory agencies like the FDA, FAA, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and on and on. One of the main reasons we do this is that these agencies have expertise that elected officials generally do not. The Tri-County Board of Health, moreover, is subject to checks and balances. It is appointed by elected county commissioners and subject to limited 5-year terms. A useful comparison is that district court judges are likewise appointed by an elected governor. No one is clamoring to invalidate every decision a judge makes before their first retention vote. Like with judges, there are a lot of good reasons we don't want to elect a public health authority. Judges need to make decisions based on law, not politics. Health authorities need to make decisions based on science, not politics. This is designed to protect the quality of their decision-making. It does not nullify their decision-making. The argument about liberties is fundamentally important to me, but of course it cuts in multiple directions. It's obvious and everyone understands that our liberties run into other people's liberties all the time, so that competing interests have to be fairly balanced against one another. I have free speech, but I can't defame someone. I have freedom of movement, but I can't trespass on private property. There is generally a right to not wear a mask if you choose, but we're also in an unprecedented pandemic. Our vulnerable neighbors have a right to be safe in public. Our businesses have the right to be rid of this virus once and for all and to open up with no COVID restrictions of any kind. Our world has a right to be done with a virus that has already killed over 130,000 Americans and 1,700 Coloradans and climbing, not to mention lost businesses, lost jobs, lost savings, and lost wealth. A 90-day mask requirement, which Tri-County Health could choose to shorten if there's progress, is not too much to ask for a hopefully permanent end to COVID in Littleton, and I don't buy that masks are the top of some slippery slope. Again, we routinely make room for our neighbors' legitimate comfort and safety needs. You have to wear pants in public. We have speed limits. You can't smoke downtown, you can't shoot guns in a neighborhood, and you don't refuse to patronize a business just because it has a no shirt, no shoes, no service sign. Temporarily requiring masks is simple and not that burdensome, especially compared to what might happen if this virus is not defeated. I recognize that some people are physically or otherwise unable to wear masks, and the order, of course, contains exceptions for this. This mandate is not and should not be a line in the sand, and it is no more about mistrusting individuals than having and enforcing speed limits is about mistrusting individuals. I think a better lens is to look again at the tremendous and ongoing human and economic toll of this epidemic, and then err on the side of safety for a short time until the virus is gone. This virus has literally been plaguing us for months, and at this point, not beating it quickly and decisively is a far greater threat to our liberties long term, like more shutdown and quarantine orders and more economic carnage. Societies are judged by how they treat their most vulnerable members, and I think it's patriotic to wear a mask in a pandemic because it shows a civic regard for those around me who by that act are made safer and made to feel safer. I would never support a proposed law I knew to be unconstitutional. I don't think this mask requirement is, and the city attorney has not advised council of such concerns. Keep in mind, though, that in our three-part system of government, our courts are there as a backstop to decide questions of constitutionality in case of legislative overreach. No law is easy to enforce, and I've been very surprised to hear from many elected officials the difficulty of enforcement is almost the main reason they give for opposing the mandate. We have speeding laws, liquor laws, anti-vaping laws, and litter laws. None of these are easy to enforce. Many of these elected officials serve in jurisdictions definitely not considering abolishing fireworks laws, even though enforcing those laws, as we saw on July 4th and every July 4th, is very difficult. We have these laws because they're important. Tri-County will carry most of the enforcement burden, not our local police. Tri-County has said their approach to enforcement will largely seek voluntary compliance through education, technical assistance, and a series of warnings. For businesses, if 3 or more complaints are received, Tri-County will reach out with educational materials, take questions, talk through the requirements of the order, provide template signage, and generally provide resources and education to assist in voluntary compliance. Only in cases of egregious and repeated violations would Tri-County pursue fines or actions against a business license. The emphasis here is clearly on supporting public health, not on punishing people. I'm of course not crazy about our police getting involved with masks, but if this happens, they handle minor law violations every day, and I know they'll handle these situations with total professionalism. I've expressed nothing but confidence for our police in the past, and I'll express nothing but confidence for them now. The last thing I want to say is that I've responded to the arguments I've heard, but I have to say they're coming from a vocal minority. The bulk of our community supports or is fine with this mask order, and my job as an at-large council member is to represent our community as a whole. In fact, I received something like 50 emails in support of the mandate. This council, as far as I know, has never received that many emails at one time on any other single issue, not even close. I've heard from teachers, nurses, children of older parents, Littleton residents with PhDs in disciplines related to public health, someone whose father died from COVID recently in a local care facility. All of these people support the mandate. I've heard from former elected officials in support of the mandate. I heard from the president of the Littleton Education Association saying she sent a survey out and her membership overwhelmingly supports the mandate. I heard from multiple members of the LPS School Board of Education saying they need the mandate if they're going to have a successful school year. The bottom line is that this virus is a historic public health and economic threat, and a mask mandate will mitigate that threat.
All right. Thank you. Council Member Milliman, and then who else? Then we have Driscoll after Milliman.
It's no surprise to anybody. Of course, I support Tri-County Health's 90-day mask mandate. I do not want to opt out of this. We're in a pandemic. We're in a pandemic that our society has never had to experience. This mask mandate is not a political issue. It's a public health issue. Public health issue. Nobody likes what's going on. We're all sick of the COVID. I go to work. I'm a nurse. I work at Children's, for those of you that don't know. I work in the COVID testing. I call it the torture shed, but it's a shed out in the parking lot. And we're seeing record numbers every day now of not only patients from Children's, but community members coming through to being tested. We're seeing some pretty sick patients coming through. I go to work. I work in, as some of you have heard, because I've complained about it. Right now, you know, my job is, it's really hard. I go to work. I wear the PPE, the N95 mask, the face shield, the gown. I'm in my scrubs. We're outside in 100-degree heat. Very little, any kind of cooling system. I'm torturing children by putting swabs down their noses, touching their brains. But it's all a part of, and I cause them to cry and scream, and the parents start crying. But it's all a part of trying to keep our patients, our community safe and healthy. And I kind of look at Tri-County Health as the same way. I know that that organization is made up of doctors, nurse practitioners, nurses, statisticians, people that are dedicated to pulling together the data, the research to help protect our public health, our community. This virus doesn't care what zip code you live in. It doesn't care what county you live in. It doesn't even care what country you live in. What it's looking for is the most perfect host. And the United States of America right now, quite honestly, is the perfect host for this virus. So even if the virus is exploding in Houston or in Florida right now, and it's quiet in Colorado, there's no guarantees that that's going to reverse course. And we have the same issues here in Colorado that they are now experiencing in other states. It is our duty as Americans, as humans, as people who care about each other, to do just basic things. Wear a mask, wash your hands, try to socially distance from one another to help bring the viral load, the virus cases down. And even if our numbers are low here, great, let's keep it that way. And let's help the county next to us, the neighborhood next to us. We're all in this together. It is a marathon. The virus is not over. It's not going away in the fall. Right now, Children's Hospital is setting up a mobile COVID, actually, it's not mobile. It is going to be a permanent testing site at the hospital for at least the next year. It's not going anywhere. But these small things that we can do as community members to help each other out, it's not a big ask. It really isn't. And it makes me really sad and disheartened that we as a society are pitting against each other when we should be working with each other to take these small steps so that we can keep our businesses open. I don't want my hair salon closing down. I don't want my favorite restaurant closing down because we didn't get a step ahead of this. The data is there, the science is there. Let's listen to Tri-County Health. They're good people. They're trying to do the right thing. Please, just wear the damn mask. Wear it. It's easy.
All right. Cool. Thank you, Kelly.
Yep.
Councilmember Driscoll. Then after that, we'll have Kay Grove.
Yes, in response to, getting plenty of emails, I think we received both a lot for, a lot against the mandate. So, there are reasons were spelled out why they don't want to follow the mandate. I'm okay with the way things are right now, wearing your mask into the restaurant until you get seated. But to have it mandatory all times, anytime you're out and about, I am not going to go cycling with a mask on. I'll tell you that right now. I won't go cycling with a mask on. I can't breathe. And so my question is, I believe that vote was a 5-4 vote in favor of the mandate. what do those 4 other doctors know that we don't know? And I think Scott said it was a consensus. Well, 5-4, there's some things out there we don't know. And Karina obviously told us a little bit about what was happening in Littleton. And so I would like to stay with status quo for 90 days, not the full mask all time, anytime.
All right. Thank you. Council Member Grove.
I would like to be supportive of the Tri-County mandate. I know not everyone is supportive of it. This is a horrible illness. And if this is a little thing that we can do to be polite, help our neighbors, protect our workers, I say let's go with the experts for the next 90 days.
Okay, thank you. Council Member Fay.
I counted 18 emails I got opposed to the mandate. And if we are going to consider going forward on talking about this at the next meeting, I would like to have answers to what was in all 18 of those emails. And that is, how is mask wearing violating human religious rights? That was in there. Exactly how does mask wearing hurt individuals' physical and emotional well-being? That was in all those emails. We all got all those emails. How does wearing a mask reduce blood and tissue oxygenation, and how is it deadly? It seems that the opposition to wearing masks is coming from a belief that there are serious harms to wearing a mask. And so I would, before we go forward, would like to have an expert or two explain to us these things, because I haven't heard these claims before I got those 18 emails. What else? Yeah, physical and emotional harm. So we have quite a constituency out there, apparently, by the number of emails we all got, that believe these things. Masks contain carcinogens that put people at risk from toxic chemicals, hinder detoxification, it doesn't let us exhale, impairs the immune system. So these are things that clearly a lot of people believe. If we're going to go forward, we need to get answers to these.
Thank you. All right, that's my turn. Excellent comments by everybody. A lot of passion. This is a very emotional issue. And there has been times on City Council and Planning Commission when we literally have received hundreds of emails on certain issues. And this one is no more or less emotional than others that we've received. It is interesting that the Tri-County Board passed it 5-4. I'm curious as to what those other 4, the ones that were opposed, what they were thinking at that time. It's also interesting that Tri-County Health gave an option for jurisdictions to opt out. Earlier today, I found that Douglas County, as we know, they're opting out as a whole. Centennial appears as though they're going to opt out. Not sure about Jefferson County to our west, Inglewood to our north. Of course, I think they've already jumped into leaving the Tri-County order. The Governor Polis has strongly expressed his desires for everybody to wear masks, but yet he hasn't come out and made a state order, leaving it up to the local jurisdictions to make up their own minds on this. I think the vast majority of the COVID-19 cases are taking place in Aurora and also taking place in Adams County. And that's Tri-County is looking very closely at those areas because their numbers are are up, although their numbers are going down, but they have a lot more than we do here. Western Arapahoe County, as well as Douglas County, our numbers are low. We have very low numbers. According to Tri-County's website, and this is Tri-County's website, in Arapahoe County, 75% of the people are wearing masks. 75%. Adams County, where there is an issue, it's 60% are wearing masks, and Douglas County is 77% wearing masks. Also, according to Tri-County data, the COVID-19 cases are continuing to drop. They're increasing in certain areas like Aurora or Adams County, but they're going down in most of the areas. There was a spike the first week of June, and there was also a spike the first week of July for the first weeks of those months. But it was also the beginning of July when Tri-County decided to make the vote. It's when there was an increase in parts of Arapahoe County and Adams. And that's when Tri-County had to file for a vote for the mandatory mask. But the numbers have since gone down. Again, since even the vote of a week ago, the numbers have gone down to the numbers that were at the beginning of June before there was a spike in June. Again, according to Tri-County website, the 3-day rolling average, it indicates that the new numbers of cases have gone down. Again, there was a spike in the beginning of July, but the numbers have since gone down. According to Tri-County Health's website, the daily hospitalization rates in Arapahoe County have dropped nearly to zero, and on some days it is zero on a daily basis, and it just depends on the day. Arapahoe County is gone down. The spikes that took place the first week of July, and since July 8th, when was the height, those numbers of hospitalizations again have dropped. The numbers have consistently gone down in Arapahoe County. And according to Tri-County Health, the death rates in Arapahoe County are consistently going down since mid-June. The daily death rates have not increased. They have gone down. Again, Tri-County numbers continue to improve with occasional spikes. There may not be we may not even have an effective vaccine for this thing for months, if not years, which leads me to question, are we going to shut down every time there's a spike? In the United States, the stats that I read is 50,000 to 60,000 people die every year because of the seasonal flu. Are we now going to shut down every time that the seasonal flu spikes? Are schools going to close, from November to April because there's a spike in the flu? Are we going to continue to close down our businesses, our restaurants, our schools, our churches, because every time there's an increase in COVID-19 or the seasonal flu, are we going to close them down because there's a spike? Putting a mandate on mask wearing will not increase people wearing masks in Arapahoe County. Again, like I said, there's 75%. That's a pretty good number, I'd say. Tri-County Health, they state in their mandate that any business open to the public that permits an individual to enter or remain in the business or on the premises without a required face covering may be subject to suspension or revocation of their license by the appropriate licensing authority as provided by law. So by agreeing to the Tri-County mandate, we are making it the businesses the enforcer of the Tri-County Health order. And Tri-County Health, their responses, they'll come back with education. And Littleton can do more, perhaps, to educate folks out there, provide information to folks. Across the Front Range, there's also been an increase in confrontation with folks that wear a mask and don't wear a mask, between the two. And that has in part to do with some of what they've been hearing about mask wearing. The governor himself said last month that we should politely shame people into wearing masks. That's not the right approach for that. And now we have people confronting each other. we need to take individual responsibility. And if possible, if you're sick and if possible, stay home, don't go out. It should always be that way. But now I think it's been brought to light. It makes sense to wear a mask when you go out and about. But it's an individual thing that you gotta, when you go into a business, they want you to wear a mask. If you want to do business with that business, wear a mask or don't go to that business. I know as council members, we seek out consultants all the time that are experts, because we're not experts on everything, but we do take advice and listen to consultants, and we make a decision. We don't always agree with consultants, just as we don't always agree with other experts. And people keep saying, this is about life. Do you want to make somebody sick because you're going to kill people? Well, you know what? We kill millions of people every year in this country due to abortions. But we don't seem to have an outcry for that, not by many. And that affects a lot of minorities right there. But I am in favor of opting out of the Tri-County Health Order. Thank you. So if I look at the count, though, we have 4 council members that do want to stay in. And with that, council, unless there's any direction on this, any other direction, we have no direction to take unless there's something we want to change. And I see it, Karina. Hang on just one sec. So our choices, our options, as you remember that we heard from Reed, our city attorney, was we don't have to do anything, which means we do as Tri-County has ordered, or we can opt out by a certain date. I think the 23rd, I think was the date, or we can make our own ordinance of some sort. Councilmember Elrod.
I have a couple of things that I want to comment on. I have a comment on process, or a question on process that I'll ask, but maybe ask for Mark or Reed to answer afterwards. The one, we should be voting on anything tonight because tonight is a study session, so we are not voting on anything.
Correct. That's correct. That's unknown. Yeah.
Okay. We are just going to be given direction to staff of whether or not we want to take this to a public meeting and officially vote on it. So I just wanted to provide that clarity and I guess ask that question to confirm. Yep. And with that, I'm a proponent of taking it to a public meeting for that official vote, for the opportunity to allow the public to comment, for the opportunity to share information, the information from Tri-County, the information from the state, to give us the opportunity to provide the clarity that I think this order has actually created more confusion. I think it's creating the opposite effect of what I don't want to speak for them, but I think what they were trying to achieve, in that one of the biggest challenges that we've had with all of this through many months is things kept changing. The state said this, and then the county said that, and then we have a variance process, and now we have an opt-out, and there is the more of these kind of one-offs that occur, the harder it is to convey a very consistent message. And this is some of the challenges that I saw and have read from our constituents that we heard from today, where there is this perception that if we opt out, it means that all of a sudden you should not be wearing a mask, that we're saying that you should not be wearing a mask. And I think that is very unfortunate that it's triggered that response, because that I'm certain that was not the intent of Tri-County. And so there was a comment from a council member that said, this is a small thing to ask to wear the mask. And I think that's a fair comment. And I think actually our community has actually shown that they are, right? We don't need, our community at large does not need someone to say, you absolutely have to do this. We have been, people have access to the information to show what's happening, what's not happening, what the impact is not. Jerry, the latest numbers from this afternoon at the Tri-County meeting, Dr. Douglas has stated voluntary compliance is at 87%. So we as individuals are being responsible. We are respecting our neighbors. I think what it shows about Littleton and how successful we have been is we are pretty fantastic as a community in Littleton. People should look to us and say, hey, they're doing it right. They're a strong community. They're talking to their neighbors. They, you know, even if they're on opposing sides, they're doing the right thing to respect our neighbors. So my purpose of taking it to a public comment is to give us an opportunity to talk about what this is and talk about what it isn't. It's to come to a formal vote. We were given that opportunity and that responsibility from Tri-County to make a local decision. And I think we should embrace that, regardless of where the vote ends up. I think it's important to bring that conversation forward.
All right, Council, is there Council Member Milliman?
I want to thank everybody for their comments tonight. But I will just reiterate again, the virus does not care if it's exploding in one area and it's light in another. It's very patient. It is looking for the host. And whether you become the host and you are asymptomatic, you may pass it on to somebody that has a weakened immune system or can't tolerate being the host. Again, I think we have to collectively work together. I wish we could work together as a country, but if we can't work together as a country, my God, and we can't even pull it together as a state, I really wish that we could pull it together within the Tri-County Health Department. And I appreciate those folks. They're putting out evidence-based scientific data. Again, the virus doesn't care, it's patient. This is gonna go on and on and on and on until we get a vaccine, and who knows when that's gonna be. And if we wanna go up and down with opening and closing and opening and closing and people losing jobs and people losing their apartments, then this piecemealing together of we're not gonna, you know, and I will tell you too, within the city of Littleton, I walk the trails a lot. I have seen a marked decrease in people wearing masks on the trails. People walking and they're not 6 feet apart. Cycling, that might be a different issue, I don't know. But I will tell you, I have seen less masks being worn on the trails and out in public. People are getting kind of lax about it. And we're starting to see those numbers rise. And they are starting to rise in Colorado, by the way. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Anyway, you know where I stand.
Council Member Grove.
Yes, I was wondering from Reed, I think we know where we stand. I'm not sure about Carol, but I think we have 3 in favor of sticking with the mandate. I know we have 3 looking at other options.
We have 4 in favor of staying in.
Then if we have 4 in favor of staying in, why take any more time? We've received.
We don't have to do anything else at this point. Yeah.
We've heard from numerous citizens on this, and why should we have any more data and take any more time? I think we have our answer. I think we're done.
Okay.
Right.
So,
even though it's not a vote, it's direction.
Exactly. Yeah, we're given direction. So I just want to make sure I have those that want to stay in include Council Member Fay, Grove, Milliman, and Mayor Pro Tem Millen. So that's 4 right there. So Council, unless you want to advance it, anything beyond tonight, I think our direction from from council would be no direction whatsoever, which means we stay with Tri-County. So unless there's any more, I think you have your direction, city manager and city attorney.
Yes, thank you for recapping.
All right. Then we're gonna, if there's nothing else, then let's move on to our next, council or city manager. You have some comments, additional comments?
I know it's a late hour here, but I do have a couple of just updates, and I'm going to elaborate with the detail on some of this in an email as part of my weekly update to council. But just quickly, we have been pretty successful here today. We've been awarded 3 grants, one for $253,000 roughly from the Arapahoe County Open Space for a pedestrian connection as part of the Rio Grande Bridge replacement. This was a high priority coming out the southwest. So that's great news and great work on the part of our team that's put these grants together. We also got 2 planning grants for the Superchi and the Jackass Gulch. So those are about $100,000 a piece, again, planning grants. I'm also going to want to touch on the census here in more detail. But Littleton remains one of the top 20 cities for response rates. We're at about 72% at this point. 65% is where Colorado's at on the average. Between the September 22nd and the 24th is when the Census Bureau is going to go out and actually do more in-person contacts to get that percent up. So it is very important, the census. I think one of you as council commented on that. I also just want to give you an update in more detail about RTD. I think they are obviously very significantly challenged. They had planned some reductions in the 30 to 40% range prior to COVID. Their down ridership is by over 85%. They have received some significant care funding, but it's only going to touch a lot of the operations piece and not the capital. They are proceeding with a reimagined strategic planning project. In fact, they have a presentation before our Transportation Mobility Board on that subject. And today, July 14th, is the 20th anniversary of the opening of the Southwest Rail Line. So 20 years, we've been having the benefit of light rail in our community. Last issue is the council's well aware, and we've been pushing out a pretty strong message. We have a telephone town hall tomorrow night from 6 to 7:30. The subject is policing in the modern era, and we have Police Chief Stevens as part of that, and along with a lot of his deputy chiefs. I think this is going to be a pretty robust conversation. Last time we did a telephone town hall, we had over 600 people engaged in one of these. So we're going to collect all this information, and I've actually put together a study session on the 21st for council to spend a little bit of time and debrief this telephone town hall. And with that, that's the quick summary of my updates, and I'll elaborate more in an email. So that's it, Mayor.
Great. All right. Thank you. City Attorney.
Mark took all my time, so nothing from the City Attorney's office.
Sounds good to me. I do have a couple things I want to go over. Council, if you haven't had a chance to get down to the state capitol lately, go down there, see what a mess that capitol is. The windows are broken out all on the first floor. They're boarded up. Graffiti is literally everywhere on that building. The state has cleaned it up a couple different times, but it keeps coming back. It's atrocious. Go down and see what's happened to our state capitol. It's terrible. Our next regular meeting is Tuesday. That's the 21st. But also check your emails, because on this coming Thursday, the South Platte Water Renewal Partners, that's our water treatment plant, is going to send out an email. It's going to have the presentation for our meeting, which is on the 23rd. That's Thursday, the 23rd. That starts at 8. It'll end by 10 o'clock. And I think Councilmember Elrod's the only one that says she cannot be there. Do we have any other members that cannot be there? Mayor Pro Tem won't be there. The rest of you will. Okay,
I'm
good.
questionable.
Yeah, it'll be Oh, you're questionable? Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I'll check.
All right. Everybody be looking for your emails and respond to them, whether accept, decline, or maybe. So I think with that, it is now, what is that? 9:49. And if there's nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.